Hello, everyone, and welcome to the free private pilot ground school. How is everyone doing out there? I appreciate you guys spending time with us this evening and for the next 4 weeks. Hello, hello, hello. What we're going to do is we're going to give it about another 4 or 5 minutes, let people kind of filter in because this is the first class, and we know that there are some that are slightly technology challenged, but we'll get through that as well. We've got a lot of material to cover, so welcome, everyone. I understand I will answer a few questions up front. And just also keep in mind, at the end of class, I'll be here for another 30 minutes or so, so I'm happy to answer any last-minute questions that you guys have here. I'll get rid of the slides so you can see a little bigger version of me. So once again, my name is David. We'll go through everything. I'll spend about 30 minutes kind of going through the class setup, and then we're going to get into aerodynamics. I'm glad that everyone made it. And if you haven't joined the Facebook group, feel free to do so. For those of you that are having problems with the website, keep in mind that there are 7,500 people registered for this course. If everybody tries to get on at once, I did have to call our web company, and there's a guy that's adding more RAM or whatever he needs to do to it. It is not crucial that you follow along or have access to the website while we're doing this course, so do not worry, please. It is not the end of the world. Any type of access issues or anything like that, we can resolve at the end of class. The more important thing is that you guys are here with us, and this is where the class material is. We will give you all the handouts and everything that you need to get you through the course, and we'll do it together. And it is being recorded. Once the class is done, I'll go ahead and download the recording and then upload it to the website for everyone. And the reason why we have a little learning portal for this, for example, is it allows us to track your progress and make sure that you basically take the quizzes and take the final exam, and that allows us to do the endorsements for you. All right. So like I said, we'll give it about 3 or 4 minutes. If you guys have any more questions, let us know. Keep in mind that, yep, we do have upwards of 7,000 people that did sign up, and there are a lot of people that are on the East Coast here. So I understand that people kind of filter off, and then you guys can watch the recording or whatever you missed of it. And then there are some people that just can't make the Monday class, so I know they'll watch this on Tuesday and they'll join us on the future classes. All right. So with that, welcome everyone. The other thing I'll also mention before we get started is try to keep the chat kosher. Let's keep it professional, everyone. Even though this is a free class, we do have a wide range of audience here. Everybody from our CAP cadets out there. I know there's quite a few on here. All the way up to our older seniors, if you will. So keep it relevant, keep it positive. I've given the permission to the moderators to just boot people and ban people if it is something that is unnecessary in terms of the comments. All right. And once again, I do still see some people saying the website is having some issues. That's perfectly fine. It is not necessary. It's not 100% necessary to be on the website at this given time. It will be back where it needs to be because we've got so many people trying to log in at once. All right. So as long as you guys are here, then we are good to go. All right. Hopefully everyone's having a great week and surviving COVID, as we all know. Got a lot of CAP people. We got our CAP Alabama, Pennsylvania, 64. What we're going to do in the classes is we will basically also go over some polls. So the polls, I'm going to add, there's a specific location that you answer a poll. Now, it usually takes people a week or two to figure this out, but try not to answer the poll questions in the chat. That kind of gives away the answer to other people. And we will go through the FAA test questions out there. All right. I'll give it another minute or so as people still filter in. If you have any questions, if you're still trying to join the Facebook group, just let me know, and we'll get that taken care of as well. But other than that, welcome, everyone. Glad you guys could be here. We are excited to have you. And I will just make sure that these last 2 people get approved. All right. Merchant Marine, awesome, John. Got some private pilots. So for some of you guys out there and gals that are already licensed pilots, and this is a refresher course, bear with me for the first 30 minutes or so. There are some brand new folks or student pilots that have not been in an airplane. We will be talking about just the basic privileges and limitations, the hour requirements, and everything else. So just stick with me on that. The last half of the class is going to be the more in-depth refresher once we start getting into aerodynamics. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. other people can kind of filter in as we get going here. And welcome, everyone. All right, so this is the free private pilot ground school course. We are going to be talking initially about the following topics. So we'll talk a little bit about who we are. I'll introduce myself. We'll talk about the course itself. How does the course work? What is the whole purpose of this course? How do I log in? What happens if I forget my password? We'll go through that. We'll talk about private pilot privileges and limitations, what you can and cannot do as a licensed pilot. And the private pilot is the class that you're covering here. I know there are some people out there that want a sport pilot license, which is slightly different, but the material is relatively the same. And for our helicopter folks, it's about 90% the same as well. We'll talk about the medical requirements. You are required to have a type of medical, and there's a few different types that the FAA does require. We'll talk about how to get one and how to get a student pilot license in the process. Then after that, we'll take a quick 5-minute break. We'll talk about aircraft components. So this is the main parts of an airplane. So everything from the fuselage to the wings. We'll also talk about how we actually move an aircraft about its axis. Then after that, we'll give you guys another break and we'll go through the actual aerodynamics section, which is going to cover everything in terms of the basics of aerodynamics, lift, weight, thrust, drag. How does an airplane actually fly? We'll talk about ground effect, wingtip vortices, wake turbulence avoidance, and what is wake turbulence, and everything in between. And then we'll wrap it up and we'll leave it for any questions you guys may or may not have at the end of class. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and start off a little bit about who we are. So, this is Checkride Prep, and as mentioned, I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. My name is David Tushin. For those of you that have not taken a class with us before, I am going to be your lead instructor for the entire course here with the next 12 sessions. We're going to spend almost 40 hours together. And a little bit about me. I started flying in 2001, about a month before 9/11, so it wasn't really a great year to start, great month to start. And I ended up, because of 9/11, putting everything on hold and kind of doing the corporate route, business school type thing, and just kind of doing something other than aviation at that point, since it didn't seem very promising. I came back to aviation in 2016, 2017, got all of my licenses in exactly 6 months at a normal Part 61 school. It wasn't accelerated. I actually got my CFII first at 5 months and 29 days. Then I got my CFI a day later at exactly 6 months and finished up everything. From that point, I think that was in December of 2017, I had about 260 hours. And then I went to 1,500 hours by July of 2018. So I was basically flying my butt off, working with students. I had about 20 or 30 students at the time and was flying every single day. As much as I could, which is the legal limit as an instructor, is 8 hours in a 24-hour period. From that point, I got hired on with Compass Airlines, and I flew the Embraer 175 out of Los Angeles International. Had a great time with that company, a lot of fun, continued, traveling around the country, and we flew up to Canada and Mexico, and I think as far out as Nashville, so a great group of guys and gals that we got to work with. That's basically a little bit about me. All right, guys. So that's my passion here. I have never not instructed. Even when I was working for the airlines, I continue to instruct, continue to have students. So my passion is to kind of get you guys through this course. I understand it's going to be a lot like drinking from a fire hose. That's a great analogy. But we're going to do it all together. Like I said, with the Facebook group that's out there, that will also help you. You guys are all helping each other, and we'll all get through this at the end of the day. All right. So about Checkride Prep, a little bit about us. So it started in 2017, and we basically provide flight training for a lot of varieties, everything from private pilot all the way through advanced training for commercial and also CFI classes. So as you guys can see there, that's one of our classrooms. That's actually one of our older classrooms that we had. And that was a CFI class that was going on where they're all scratching their head. And in the CFI class, you can see that obviously it is in depth and it is a lot of information. We'll talk about what this course will entail here in just a moment as well. But that's a little bit about us. So with that, couple of course updates. You guys are already in this course. So as you guys know, July 20th through August 14th, this course is going to run for 4 weeks or 12 classes total, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific time. At the end of the day, we also have a couple other classes that are coming up at the end of August of this year. We're going to do our commercial pilot ground school. And then for those that need their CFI refresher, we're going to do the CFI and the double I in November and December of this year as well. We post all that stuff on our Facebook. So you guys, if you're not a member of Facebook, I'm not a huge user of Facebook, but that kind of allows people to get set up. Let me go ahead and share a course calendar with everyone here. So this is the course calendar. You guys can download it. It's also located on the Facebook group, and it's also located on the online portal. This is how the course is set up. So as mentioned, there's a total of 12 lessons that make up the Private Pilot Ground School. Those 12 lessons are roughly going to be about 3.5 hours in length. So like I said, if you're on the later end of the spectrum, if you're on the East Coast or even further, then I would obviously expect you guys to taper off, go to bed. You guys can catch what you missed in the morning. It's about 42 hours of live class, and then the last 30 minutes we keep for the live Q&A. Classes are every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So that's the best that we can do to kind of make sure everybody kind of falls in line in terms of being out of work here on the West Coast and not being way too late on the East Coast. And this course is here to help you with the FAA written, the oral, and the practical exam. So it's not just here to get you through the oral. This is also going to be a great refresher for our rusty pilots. A rusty pilot, for those of you that don't know, are basically any pilot that's kind of been out of aviation. They already have their license, and then they've been out of aviation for a while, and they just need a good refresher to kind of stay current, if you will. All right. As mentioned, you'll have the opportunity to chat with me and our mods. Our mods, keep in mind, you've got Zaf and Missy out there. Zaf is working. He's very, very knowledgeable. He's got his AGI, IGI, and working on his CFI. Missy is also our other mod. You can always ask her questions. She's Mrs. ATP out there, so she's got an airline transport pilot license and a whole slew of other 3-letter endorsements after her name. And she bakes cookies, so she'll all share with us hopefully during the breaks. That calendar that I did share with you will go over all of the classes in terms of when the classes are occurring and the tests that are associated with the classes. You guys will start to figure this out step by step as we go through. Now, the way that this course works, as you guys have already kind of figured out, is that we release the course or the specific class materials 2 hours before the lecture. That way, what you'll end up doing, that will give you the documents for the class or to study. We put all the supplemental information, copies of the videos that we show here, everything that you need, including the test material to take the test, are going to be located on that online portal. The reason why we do that, a lot of people say, why don't we just do a Facebook Live? We need to, as instructors, track your progress to make sure that when we do sign you off at the end of class that you did actually take you did show up when you needed to show up and took the quizzes, which we'll talk about here as well. All right. So when we talk about 2 different times, you guys usually get an email reminder about 3 hours before class. The class materials open up on the website 2 hours before class. And then you guys are all here with me now at 5 p.m. Pacific time or wherever your local time is. Once the class becomes available, if you guys do not receive the emails, you guys should get 2 emails for every class, basically an email reminder that the class is starting. And then at the end of class, you'll get an email reminder stating that the replay or the recorded content is available to you at that point. All right. If you go to the lesson, just as you guys can see here, I'll show you on the screen with a nice pink color. What you guys see here is this webinar class link, which is just above the actual video that's just used as a placeholder. If you are unable to find your specific email for the day, you can log into the website, click on that link, and that will take you to where you guys are currently located. We also post that information on Facebook and Instagram, so you can always follow along there as well. All right. Please allow us about an hour or 2 to get these lessons uploaded for you, just because the downloading doesn't take very long. It's mainly the uploading back to the website. Now, I do want to stress, a lot of people are always saying, well, what's the deal? We've all watched YouTube videos where we have to watch 11 or 12 minutes of content, and there's 60 seconds of good information, and the rest is just sales or, whatever it is. This, I can promise you, is not a watered down course. These were some images from social media that our students have shared in the past. We're going to try to make it as interactive as possible, and keep in mind that this is the same class. It's just a different delivery format, but this is the same class. If you were sitting in that classroom with us, you would get the same treatment. You would get a little binder instead of having an online course with all of your handouts on day one. But you guys will get the same experience as any other student going forward, all right? For those of you that are new to webinars, webinars are basically just a one-way street here. So you can interact with us via chat. And obviously you're seeing us. It's not a meeting thing where we can share videos. It just makes it a little bit easier. Obviously, if you're watching this, you've already hit that magical play button in the center. That's your key. Now, I guarantee you, we will lose audio at some point. You will lose audio, or I will lose audio. If that happens, go ahead and log out and then log back in. It always happens. Remember, with COVID and everything else and everybody staying home, we are competing with the thousands of kids, especially at this hour, that are on Netflix and playing video games and everything else with that bandwidth. It will happen. Do not worry. We just moved to basically just restarts a room. And if it's something that is happening on an individual level, then just go ahead and reconnect. So just hit the big X in the corner, reconnect, and you'll have no problems because we've dealt with this stuff in the past. Questions, as you guys know, you guys can ask questions to the group in the group chat. You can also ask questions to the mod or to the admins themselves. And then in the polls, we do have polls that will represent the FAA test questions as we cover each section to make sure that you guys are following along and not sleeping on me out there, and try to answer those questions to the best of your ability in the actual poll. And then at the end, we'll go over the answer and we'll share that poll with the rest of the class. All right. We are based in Camarillo, California. That is about an hour north of Los Angeles. Our airport code is KCMA. So there's a big training airport out here. All right, how do you access this course? One thing that I tried to do to kind of prevent, the server from getting too many hits at once was try to sign up everybody who did sign up or pre-sign up you guys. So you guys should have received an email. If anybody signed up after midnight or basically between midnight and now, you guys will have to sign up for the actual website. To do that, you're going to go to checkride-prep.com, and then it's pretty simple. In the upper right-hand corner, you're going to go ahead and click on the register button. That will open up this page, and it'll just ask for some basic information. Once you fill out that, you'll go to your email, you'll confirm your email, and activate the account. Now, it does not activate until we actually go in on our side and hit the activate button. So I'll do that probably midway on one of the breaks if anybody's on there. And that's as simple as that, but most of us should have that set up at this point. Once you're inside and you're logged in, I just want to point out a few things. So there are two different menu buttons out there. There's a slider on the left-hand side. So if you actually click on that little red thing right there in the corner, that is going to basically open up the menu. Or you can click, if you want to upload your picture, you can click on your name and it'll basically load a drop-down menu as well. So on that drop-down menu, you can click on courses, make sure that you have the free online private pilot ground school course, and that will get you there. You guys can obviously send private messages to each other or to me if you need to, or I'll show you another way that you can connect as well. But once again, all the information will be loaded on there. Once you're there, I want to point out a few different things. So this is what the course currently looks like if you logged into the website. On the upper right-hand side in the blue box, that blue box is representative of where you log in and log out. That is also where the drop-down menu will occur. So if you click on my name with my picture there, that drop-down menu will show up. And that's where I can then get my course information or look up further information. On the far left-hand side, this is your menu bar. It's kind of that orangish color here. That far left-hand side is your menu bar where it has all of the lessons that are available. And it is in that specific order week by week. And then the last one I do want to point out at the center above the video placeholder in the yellow is going to be the webinar. So if you guys lose everything, just log in, click on the webinar link, and that will take you directly to where you guys are currently located. The video placeholder is just that. It is a placeholder. Remember that this is a live class. So once the class is done, then we will go ahead and upload that recording to where that video placeholder is currently sitting. And let's go ahead and look at a little bit further down. So below that video, there's a couple things that you guys will notice. If we look in area number 1, these are the individual lessons. So the lessons are broken by weeks. And then we've got lesson 1, which is Monday, lesson 2, which is going to be Wednesday, and lesson 3 for Friday. Each of those lessons, if you try to click on any future lessons, as mentioned, they won't open up until 2 hours before the class starts on that given day. Your course documents and downloads, which is number 2 here, is this entire section. So everything that we're going to talk about or anything that's associated with the course that might help you is all there for the taking, and it will be associated with the specific lesson that we're talking about, all right? Any type of website links are going to be listed below that, such as if you want to get information on how to get your student pilot license or find an FAA medical examiner. Those are all links available to you. And the last one that's very important is number 4. It's kind of hard to see, but that is your aerodynamics test. Your test is always located at the very, very bottom of the actual homework. And the homework is we'll talk about that here in a second. But that is how the course is laid out, and that's what it's going to look like once you guys are logged in. Once again, not necessary to log in given this second, and then you want to register each person if you can. Yep, Tom, correct. All right, if you click on that aerodynamics test, this is what the test will look like. As you can see at the top, this is all of the test questions. So in this lesson, there's a total of 45 questions. It does allow you to review the questions. So in the event that you weren't sure, let's say that you answer the question, but you're like 50-50, the review will basically mark it a specific color to let you color code it and then know to kind of go back to that specific question. You know, and basically re-review it. Now, in the past, you had to take all of the questions or answer all the questions, otherwise you lose the data. Now, what will end up happening is this save and next button. On some of the longer tests, like the weather theory test, when you hit save and next, you can then go outside of that quiz, and when you return to that quiz, it will basically ask you, do you want to start over or do you want to continue the same quiz? So it will save your results up to that given point. Once you're completely done with everything, this quiz summary will then turn basically to your completion. It will give you, it will email you a copy of the results, and it will give you whatever your score is. You can take it as many times as you want, and each quiz will then, these are the same test questions that I would expect you to see on your final FAA exam, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, all right? When it comes to the FAA knowledge supplements, there are a lot of questions out there that will specifically refer to a testing figure. It is a physical document, and it looks like this, just like what you guys see here. It's a book that's really small. It's about 60 or 70 pages. Because it's such a large document, I wasn't able to upload it, but I do give you guys a direct link. I'll actually go back a slide here, just one slide. So at the very bottom where it says course website links, you see this thing that I've highlighted in the red box. If you click on that, that is that PDF document of all of the test figures. I recommend that you guys basically download that and put that on your desktop to refer to. We do put the test figures into the questions, but once again, it's a little bit easier to look at it at the PDF because then you can zoom in a bit more. As mentioned, basically we put this website link under every single lesson, just as a reminder that this is a specific document that you might need for the testing figure. If the FAA test question asks you to refer to a figure, all you're going to do is just look through it. As you can see, this is test figure number 4. And it's basically asking you an airspeed question of some type, or it could have an aviation chart on a different figure as well. All right. Just want to clarify that because we usually get a lot of emails when it comes down to that stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, let's talk a few things about study tips here. I want to make this very, very clear. This is a reminder that this course is not teaching you to the written. So what I mean by that is I'm not gonna teach you, you need to answer A for this question anytime you see this word, or you're gonna answer B for this question. All right. I'm trying to teach you guys to become safe, proficient pilots. That's the goal here. All right. So more information is probably going to be provided than what is actually necessary, but the amount of information is foundational. Okay. I want you guys to take advantage of all the quizzes and tests that are available to you. That will help you out throughout this course because the FAA exam will be 60 questions at the end of the day, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Overall, in this class, I think there's between 700 and 800 FAA test questions that have been preloaded into the system, which are going to line up with every lesson that we cover. And then I would like you to continue taking those practice tests. Every time you take a practice test, it will become easier and easier. And in the event that you are having some issues with a testing question, feel free to take a screenshot of it, email it to me. I'm happy to work through it with you. If it's something that just you keep banging your head against the wall, we are really your best resource here. That's use us, abuse us if you want, and we're going to answer as many questions as we can. Once again, make use of that Facebook group. A lot of times people in that Facebook group, we've got a lot of pilots, a lot of CFIs, a lot of experience in that group, and you guys are helping each other along the way. I'll mark out the 1,900. I think we're at 2,700 people as of today. And then make use of that testing supplement as well. So go through that testing supplement and download it. Make sure that you understand what is actually located in there. When you go in to take your actual FAA test at an FAA testing facility or approved testing facility, they're going to give you that same booklet, a hard copy of that booklet, okay? CAP, Adam, is Civil Air Patrol. That's what it stands for. All right, on the left-hand side of the screen, in the upper left, we are looking at not the instrument rating, but this is you're basically going to have 2.5 hours to take your private pilot exam. You need to get a 70% or better, and you have 60 questions to do it. And then in addition to that, we'll go over the ACS here in a few other slides, but the ACS is known as the Airman Certification Standards. That is how the FAA is grading you when it comes to the actual written portion and also your flight portion, which we'll get into as well. All right. All right, moving on. Your FAA written test endorsement and wings credits. This is what everybody always wants to know. So in order to qualify for your written endorsement, and what we mean by a written endorsement is that in order to take the official FAA test, you need an instructor to endorse you or provide basically a statement or endorsement that says you have the knowledge and you've gone through some type of training or course, and that's what you have to take to the testing center. You can't just go in and take it without that. So that's the purpose of this class. You need to have viewed all 12 lessons, whether they're the live lessons or the recorded lessons, does not matter. In any combination, the system keeps track of that. And in addition to that, you need to take the final exam, and we're requesting an 80% or higher. You can take it as many times as you want. Every time you take the final exam, the questions will basically reshuffle, meaning that it will pull questions out of that 800 question database. So you'll have an opportunity to take it multiple times. The final private pilot test will become available on the last day of class. So that is August 14th, and it becomes available just like anything else. 60 questions, 2.5 hours. And then in order to take the actual FAA test, you can be any age to take this class. We welcome everyone here. But to take or sit for the FAA private pilot exam, you need to be at least 16 years of age. And in order to get your license, you need to be 17 years of age. But once again, if you take the class, it's not a big deal because the endorsement does not expire once we give it to you. All right. All right. So let's look at if you need help. So there's a couple different resources, obviously, on the Checkride Prep website. On the left-hand side, there's a frequently asked questions. We usually put all of your frequently asked questions in there. So go ahead and check that out. That will usually answer the question in pretty quickly. Otherwise, if you're still having problems, you can go to, obviously, email. Just shoot me an email at david@checkride-prep.com. Remember that the email info does not actually work. It doesn't go anywhere. I've had a lot of people saying that they tried to re-email or respond to one of our automated emails. That does not go anywhere just because we would get way too many emails. So just let me know what your specific question is, and we'll talk about the actual flight requirements here in just a moment. All right. Something new that we're putting together, and it's still kind of in the process, is you can also go to the support website, which is just support.checkride-prep.com. And it's also a link. I think it's under support on our homepage. This will basically give you access if you need to open a ticket for whatever reason. You can submit a ticket if you don't want to do email, and we can respond that way. Or you can look at the knowledge base. The knowledge base are basically frequently asked questions. They deal with everything from general information, aviation licensing, what's required, what's not required. The textbook that's required or recommended for this class, that is, any type of technical issues, how to reset your password, billing issues, anything like that would be located on this website as well. Okay, so we're trying to make it a little bit easier for everyone. So, all right, 41 minutes in or 30 minutes in here. So what's the catch? Everyone wants to know what this catch is. Why do we give away 40 hours of instruction for free or anything else? And that's kind of the big question that everybody wants to know, right? So here is the catch. The catch is that there really is not a catch. This course is entirely free. It's 100% free. The catch is that we will remove the materials about 48 hours after the course concludes, all right? So the course materials will become unavailable on August 17th at 12 noon local time for us, which is Pacific time. The reason why it becomes unavailable is if we left it open, we can guarantee you that most people won't finish the class. It's that added incentive to make sure that you guys, we give you calendars, you guys stay focused and keep up with the materials to make sure that you guys will finish the course, because we want the most or the highest completion rate out of this class that we can get, all right? Historically, in our other classes, we get, because we close out the courses, it's 83% completion rate. So if you guys stick with it, you guys can follow along and get the certificate as well, all right? So that is the trick. That is what the whole thing is. I think in the last, since we've been offering these free classes in February, the last 3.5 months or so, I've signed almost 22 or 2,300 certificates for students. And that's for private instrument and other licenses as well. So that is the whole gotcha, if you will, or the catch to this class. So don't be intimidated by that. Everybody's in the same boat. If you guys came to my live class, we don't keep it open forever. We do our 12 classes and then we go home at the end of the day, all right? So there is a way, of course, and this is the PSA announcement, your public service announcement that you have to listen to for 2 minutes before we actually start. But there is a way to basically get your lifetime access, if you will, and I'll share it with everybody. But once again, there's two different options. We've got a private pilot course, and we also have access. We're also providing access to every other class that we've taught as well. And what that does is basically it's the few that pay for the many, if you will. So what we mean by that is that allows us to provide all these services. And what it is this gives you access to the private pilot course for indefinitely, which means you can take as long as you want. In addition to that, it also provides information. I'll give you the private pilot one. Sorry, guys. It also provides information on the actual recorded version. So this is the free version. We also have a professional version, which is basically fully done. And what it is it's all the lessons broken into 10 to 15 minute increments that have been professionally recorded and everything. And that's available to you as well. It also gets you ready for the private pilot oral. So the oral is one step that we'll talk about before your check ride, where you have to go sit down with an examiner and basically recite your different scenarios and answer those as well. We'll give you the pilot PDF, if you will, on how to become a pilot. It's basically a 140-page book that we wrote. You can get your 20% off. You get your complete training videos, the 24/7 instructor support. You have no time limit in terms of finishing your written test endorsement or getting FAA wings credits. So that's just one. And we've made it really simple. So keep in mind that it's $97, and literally that is half the cost of one single lesson with an instructor in an airplane. So remember, this is not a cheap endeavor, and we've made it pretty simple where it is $33 a month for 3 months, and you guys get access to it forever and ever and ever, all right? So that's just one way of basically helping us out, and it also helps you guys out if you're getting stuck. The other thing that we've decided to do is the first 100 people, and I'm going to actually scratch that out because I think we're at like 91 right now. The 91 people that are left will basically get a free hour of ground, 1 hour ground lesson with me. And what that will be is we'll do that over Zoom. So we'll answer any questions that you have. And it's just like a normal ground lesson. If you were to come to the office, it's normally $70 an hour. So we're giving that to you completely for free. So that's the private pilot spiel, if you will. See, that really wasn't very painful. I've got one more spiel for you as well, which is our ultimate lifetime access as well. So I'll go ahead and put that up just in case anybody wants that. It's the same deal, except what you're getting, the only differences that you're getting here are going to be, you're getting basically all of our courses. So the biggest difference is that you'll get the instrument course, the UAV course, and the ForeFlight and the commercial course. That's really the only difference between the two. Now, if you're looking for the payment plan, it is on our website, but I'll email it out because I understand the website is having a lot of fun stuff with everybody trying to log in. So don't worry about that. But that is your public service announcement. So as I mentioned, that is as painless as I can make it for you. Other than that, our goal is to drive through as much of this content as we possibly can and get you guys through your written and get you licensed pilots, hopefully once you meet the flight requirements. All right, so in that, what questions do you guys have before we continue? Do you guys have any questions? There is a CFI course, Wave L. It's going to be November and December. And the CFI course, I don't know yet. We'll figure that out. Yeah, and Stephen, $47 an hour for an instructor nowadays. That was the real deal. Now it's a lot more. So as mentioned, I'll just clarify this. Most people are able to do this entirely in the time frame that we give you. That final exam where you need an 80% or higher, you can take it as many times as you guys want. We were basically giving you up to 3 days after the last class to finish up that last little bit in terms of the final exam, which is more than enough time for everybody, okay? So as mentioned, it's 42 hours of instruction, and that is kind of the whole purpose. I will send out the link to everybody once the class is done, and you guys can, if you're interested, you also get access to the professionally recorded version of this class instead of the live version, where it is broken down into a lot more segments where it's a little bit more digestible. In the event that you have been unable to log in or anything like that, then just bear with us and we'll work on that. All right, guys. So we're going to watch, I just want to find out a little bit about this class. We're going to watch a short video, but what I want to do before that is I want to know, you guys put in the chat while this video is running. This video is produced, and I asked permission from Swain Martin. I don't know if any of you know who he is. He is an airline pilot with Envoy. He started flying, I think he was 15 or 16, and he's got a great website, swainmartin.com. And he's got 100,000 followers on YouTube and quite a bit on Instagram. And he has basically taken people through his journey of getting his solo, from his initial solo and his flight training, all the way through his time at University of North Dakota, all the way to Hawaii when he was working for Mokulele Airlines, and now as a regional pilot. So I've asked him permission to show this video to you guys. But what I want to know is, in the chat while this video is going on, why aviation? Where are you guys located? What are your personal goals? Have you started flight training? Have you not started flight training? Just to kind of get to know everybody. And this is going to be about a 6-minute video. Kind of think about it. I always like this video. I'm going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and get this started. All right, everyone. I hope you guys enjoy this course. All right, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I am sharing his website in the sticky message for everyone. I'm going to restart the slideshow here, but that is one of my favorite videos. He's a really talented individual. Like I said, he's working for Envoy Airlines. I believe he is flying the Embraer 145. If you guys want to follow along in his journey, because he posts quite a bit on his website or his YouTube channel, he produces some amazing content. And if you are interested in getting into the airlines, he produces Day in the Life of. He works with Envoy directly to do a lot of these videos. And that was from like 4 or 5 years ago. So his quality is really just upped. And I always appreciate him letting me share that video with you guys. All right. So I've been reading through all of your comments in terms of why you guys, are in aviation and where you're located. It's really exciting. So with that, I appreciate everyone for being here. What we're going to do is give me another 10 minutes and then we're going to take a break. I try to give you guys a break every hour for about 5 or 10 minutes. So stick with me for just a little bit longer and then we'll kind of go from there. All right. I'm going to get rid of my picture because you guys don't need to see me for the entire thing. But let's talk a little bit about the course syllabus here. So we're going to talk a little bit about ground school versus flight lessons. So flight lessons are primarily teaching you how to fly the airplane, controllability, maneuverability, and that is working with an individual flight instructor. They have to be at least a certified flight instructor, or CFI as they're known. And it is a little bit different than what we're going to be doing here. We're not going to be teaching you how to fly an airplane, but we will be going through all of the fundamentals. So in ground school, and the reason why it's called ground school is because everything that happens is on the ground here. We are going to be covering a lot of the information such as the theory, regulations, airspace, how to read charts, how do engines operate, aircraft systems, how do they operate, what are we looking at in terms of flight instruments and how do they actually work behind the scenes, which is usually interesting to a lot of people. In addition to that, we're also going to get into flight planning. We'll get into safety, taxiing around, in terms of deciphering and reading different taxi diagrams and talking about safety is a big part of this course as well. Like I said, at the end, I want you guys to be proficient and consistent. Okay, so I want you to be proficient in the skills that you gain, and I want you to use them consistently, not just one time. We've already talked about the class times and the class schedule, the homework and reading we'll talk about here in a minute, but as I'll just reemphasize, because I know always on the last week, people always ask me, well, is there any other requirements to get this? You have to pass the final exam with an 80% or higher, and this just will remind you on that as well. For those that are looking for FAA wings credits, and what we mean by that is already certificated licensed pilots that are taking this as a refresher, you can get your FAA wings credits. At the end of the course, there's a form that you fill out, and it's pretty simple. And then what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll credit your actual wings account at the end. And the FAA wings program, if those that don't know about it, that is basically a program that allows licensed pilots to kind of bypass what is known as a flight review that you have to do every other year. All right, course materials. We get a lot of questions about this as well. So if you have any aviation textbook other than Rod Machado, that is perfectly acceptable. If you have an ASA textbook, a Jeppesen textbook, a Gleam textbook, as long as it's not like 40 years old, we're doing pretty good because there have been a little bit of changes. Now, the text, you can get away with by not using the text for this course, but the reason why we teach out of the Rod Machado Private Pilot Handbook is because he takes very complex topics and breaks them down into very digestible, manner, and it's very easy to understand. Now, he is a comedian. For those of you that don't know Rod Machado, and I will just briefly point this out. I would say out of his book, I would say about 60 or 70 pages are jokes. Okay. So you can kind of bypass that stuff. I understand that some of his jokes can be kind of corny, and we'll see those when it comes to the actual slides, because some of the slides I do use from his book. But once again, it's not a requirement. It's just a recommendation. I did put the ISBN number on there, and also you have the option to basically go to the author's website if you want to track it down. He offers digital copies. FAA sectional chart. The FAA sectional chart, you do not need until the last week of class. It does not have to be a current chart. It could be a used chart, an expired chart. they will look like this. You can Google FAA sectional chart. And the reason why I want you guys to have a sectional is for flight planning purposes. I know we can do this on all these cool technology websites, but we want to give you the basic skills of basically drawing it on paper, drawing it on an aviation map, and being able to plot from point A to point B and do an entire flight plan, which is what we're going to do on the second to last class. Okay, which I believe is going to be on August 12th that you're going to need that by. Then we've got the aviation plotter, which is this guy right here. There's two different types of aviation plotters. This is a fixed plotter, as you can see here, that doesn't move. The newer, fancier ones, they will actually move, so they're rotatable, meaning that this piece that I've kind of highlighted will actually rotate. Does not matter which one you get, just have that by the second to last class. And just as a reminder, I'll put it here, August 12th is the date, okay? Then the last thing that you need is an E6B. An E6B is just an electronic flight computer, if you will, and it's not really electronic. This is a flight computer that basically will tell us information on time, fuel, and distance calculations. It does a lot of conversions. It's specifically for aviation. You can usually pick up a cheap one for $10 or so, $10 to $15. You can get a aviation plotter for $10 or $15, and you can usually get a chart for about $7, or just bum one off of a friend if you can. And remember, you do not need this stuff until roughly August 12th, but if you can have it, it'd be great. And then, as mentioned, if you guys want to search the book, I know a lot of people are in this course, so it is difficult, but I did talk with Rod, I think it was last week, and he still has copies available. So you can reach out directly to the author's website, I believe it's rodmachado.com, and you can pick up a copy there or a digital copy as well. All right. It does not matter if you have a plastic E6B or a paper E6B. I have the metal E6B. I was actually, one of my students gave this to me, Frank, but I still have my original paper E6B from 2001. They still work. If you have an electronic E6B, that's perfectly fine as well. What I mean by that is they have electronic calculator versions of the same thing. You can get the app for your phone, but keep in mind, you're not allowed to bring in your cell phone to the actual FAA exam, all right? All right, two other books that I want to mention here. The one on the left is where we pull a lot of the resources out of. So in the event that you do not have the Rod Machado book, don't worry. I've included specific readings from the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. This is known as what we call the PHAC. And this is providing basic knowledge for the student prior to learning flight. And this is basically going to give you all of the information from aerodynamics to systems to flight instruments to airspace. It has a lot of the theory behind it. The book on the right that has the blue background is known as the Airplane Flying Handbook. This is providing you all of the information on how to fly the airplane. So these are two FAA resources. They've done an amazing job in terms of, they used to be very boring and colorless and really hard to read, but now they're actually really good. These are located on the actual lesson 1 page, so you guys do have access to it. You don't need to buy these books. You can download them on the PDF, although they are available if you're so inclined to actually pick up, or you want a hard copy, you can pick them up on Amazon or whatever your local bookstore or flight, your aviation store is. So that's the difference between what we call the PHAC and the Airplane Flying Handbook. Once again, if you're interested in learning how to fly the maneuvers, which is not what we're teaching in this class, that is in the book on the right-hand side, all right? Now, for those of you that have been outside of aviation for a long period of time, things have changed, obviously. We've got the wonderful world of GPS that came on board and is very, very prevalent nowadays, especially on the instrument side of things, but we do have these things called electronic flight bags. So back in the day, everybody had to carry around all these paper charts, and the charts would expire every 28 days or 6 months, depending on the different types of charts. And you'd see all these airline pilots carrying around these big leather briefcases in the airports, and that's really no longer the case. Everything, when I was working at Compass, everything that we did was on an EFB, and the EFB basically gave us all of our charts on an iPad, right? So this gives us all the information on VFR and IFR taxi charts. If you guys or gals have this, you can use this for this course. Once again, it's not a requirement. This is just the direction that the industry is going. And what it does is it basically is giving you the same, or if not better, technology than what the airlines currently possess in terms of navigation and situational awareness. It also provides an electronic version of your logbook if you want one. And remember that the ForeFlight is an Apple-only app. If you guys are non-Apple users, what you can do is you can look up Garmin Pilot, which is the equivalent on the other side. All right. All right, let's look at some of these requirements. So you have to be at least 17 years of age or older in order to sit to take the actual practical exam, meaning to become a licensed pilot, all right? To sit for the written, you only need to be 16 years old. Now, you need to be able to read, write, and converse fluently in English. We'll talk about the FAA medical certificate, but you will need to have some type of FAA medical certificate. Now, number 4 is what we are doing in this class, and this is what I'm signing you off for. So this is receive and log ground training from an authorized instructor or complete a home study course. That is the purpose of this class. Pass a knowledge test with a score of 70% or better. So once you guys receive that written endorsement, then you can go to an approved testing center, take that endorsement there, and then once you pass the FAA test, then those results are valid for 24 calendar months. So that means you've got 24 months in order to finish your flight training and take your check ride. If you don't finish it in that time frame, then you're going to have to retake that test. Now, for the FAA written exam, for the endorsement, my endorsement does not expire once you get it. So if you're a little bit younger, I know we've got some 11, 12, 13-year-olds in the class, just hang on to that certificate. And once you guys are old enough to take or sit for the FAA exam, then you can take it. Or if some of you guys are going to potentially start flight training a little bit later in time, or you want more time to study for the course, then what will end up happening is that you can then, take it at your leisure at another point in time. All right, you need to have the appropriate flight experience. So this course is not giving you flight experience, but I would highly recommend working with a local flight school. We'll talk about that here in the next couple of slides. And you need a minimum of 40 hours of flight instruction and solo flight time that will demonstrate the skills. So it's a minimum of 40 hours, but keep in mind the national average is somewhere between 55 to 65 hours. And I've had students personally that get it done in 41 hours, and I've had students that do it in 160 hours. Everybody is different when it comes to picking up the skills. All right. And yep, it's now the PTS. Sorry, that is an older typo. We're outside of the PTS. Someone caught that. We are no longer using that. We're using something called the ACS, which is the Airman Certification Standards, which we'll talk about here in a minute. All right. Now, let's break down those 40 hours just real quickly so you guys can see how that's done. Remember that 40 hours is the FAA minimum, so you're going to need at least 20 hours of dual. Anytime we use the word dual, that means that it's with an authorized instructor. And what that is broken down into is that you'll do at least 3 hours of cross-country flight training. You'll have 3 hours of night flight training, including a cross-country of 100 nautical miles. You'll have 10 takeoff and landings to a full stop in a traffic pattern at a towered airport at night. You'll have 3 hours of flight training by reference to instruments. This is where we put like these little hood or shades on you, so you can't look outside. You can just look at the instruments, and you're flying solely by reference to the instruments without looking at anything outside. And that's kind of the purpose of the whole instrument license, which is your next rating. And then you need 3 hours of flight training within 60 days of taking your final exam, all right? In addition to that, you need at least 10 hours of solo flight. Solo flight is just you by yourself, no one else in the plane, not your instructor in the plane, not your friend. You're not allowed to carry any passengers, cargo, or anything else along the lines when you're in training. This is just going to be yourself. So you'll have at least 5 hours of cross-country flying. Now, cross-country flying just means that does not mean you're flying from LA to New York, so don't worry, you're not going to be gone that long. A cross-country is 50 nautical miles with a landing away from wherever your airport is, okay? So, and what we mean by 50 nautical miles is it's straight line distance. If my airport is here and I'm going to here and I'm zigging and zagging, I don't really count the zigzag. It is from point to point. And that is what we measure in terms of the 50 nautical miles with the landing, all right? So the flight training works in a three-phased way. The way that I kind of like to look at it is there are 3 phases in your student flight training. The first phase is what I call the pre-solo phase. Now, this isn't official. This is just how I explain it to students. Your pre-solo phase is getting you up with the instructor and making sure that you are comfortable and can basically have control of the airplane. So what we do is we take you up to 3,000 or 4,000 feet. We want you to hold altitude. We give you turns to the right, to the left. We want you to fly in a certain direction. Then we want you to do climbs, descents, those types of things, and make sure that you have control. Then we work on different types of stalls, and we'll talk about that here once we get into aerodynamics. And then once we're done with that, and I'm comfortable that you can control the airplane, then we take you down to the ground and work in the traffic pattern, because I need you to hold a specific altitude when we're by the airport. All right. From there, it's all about working on landings and emergency procedures and everything else. And then once you're done with that, it's not when you're ready, it's when the CFI is comfortable to sign you off. Then what will end up happening is what I do with my students is I have them park at the local FBO. I get out of the airplane, I go inside, have my cookie and my lemonade, and I sign them off, and they get to do some pattern work by themselves, and that's the first time that they solo. All right. Once you're done with the solo and you're flying by yourself, the next phase is broken into that cross-country phase. So that cross-country phase is working with the student and teaching you how to plan your cross countries, which we're going to do in this class anyways. And then we will actually have to fly across country together in order to prep you before you fly the cross country by yourself. And then the last phase is just getting you ready for the practical exam. So with the FAA exam, there's 3 different things you have to worry about. The first one is an FAA written test, which hopefully everyone will take once we're done with the class. Then you're going to have your 40 hours of training at minimum. Then from that point, once you're ready to take the final exam, your final exam consists of an oral and a practical exam. An oral exam is basically with an FAA, it could be an FAA safety inspector, which is an employee of the FAA, or it could be what is known and is more common nowadays as a DPE, a designated pilot examiner, which is basically a contractor for the FAA. And what will end up happening is you'll go in and they'll give you it's a scenario-based exam. They'll have you prepare a flight plan going from point to point previous to actually showing up. And it will last, your oral will last somewhere between 3 to 5 hours, depending on how good you are or not. Let's say that. Okay, so the more you prepare for it, they will be questions like, prove to me that you can fly this airplane, which is a very, very open-ended question. Our private pilot oral course goes through all this stuff, so we don't really have to go into it in too much detail. Once you get past the oral, that same day, that's when you're going to do your practical. Your practical is your opportunity to get into the aircraft and show that examiner that you can fly that airplane safely. So you'll do a fictional flight plan. You'll do some emergency procedures, takeoff and landings. You'll have to do different stalls. You're going to get an opportunity to show the examiner basically only once each maneuver that is required on your final exam. And that practical or the airplane portion is usually about 1.1, 1.5, somewhere in there. So just a little between an hour and a half in the airplane with the examiner. If you pass that section, then they give you a handshake, and that's when you get your temporary certificate. So that is how that works, all right? I know that's a lot of information, but I did include the FAA Student Pilot Guide in the on the website, so you guys can review that as well. All right, let's talk about the differences between different training environments. Us at Checkride Prep, we were a Part 61 school. So there's 2 different types that you're going to hear about, Part 61 and Part 141. The 141 schools are highly structured, and they're generally going to be university programs, or they could just be structured programs that have to be approved by the FAA. They go through a little bit more rigorous inspections just because of the fact that the FAA has to recertify them every year, and they need to meet a lot of different regulations in the meantime. Now, what that means for you as the student is that a 141, the lessons are already pre-planned, and there's not a lot of flexibility. So if it says that lesson 1, 2, and 3, you need to basically fly straight and level, and you're showing me that you can fly straight and level on lesson 1, well, guess what? You're going to do straight and level on lesson 2 and 3 until you get to the next step. With Part 61, we have basically complete flexibility to go in any direction. If I wanted to start off with stalls first, we could do that. Or if I wanted to really drive myself nuts, I could do landings on the first day with students, although I wouldn't recommend it. So we can kind of bounce around depending on where the students are at that given moment, okay? Give me 5 more minutes and then we'll take a break, guys. All right. So that's the differences between the two different types of schools here in the United States. The next thing I want to talk about is the ACS. The ACS is known as the Airman Certification Standards. This basically will tell you, the student, the instructors, and the evaluators what you must know, what you have to consider in order to pass the knowledge test and also the oral and the practical exam. Okay. So it's going to include 3 different areas. As we can see here, we've got the knowledge component, we have a risk management component, and a skills component. Now, a lot of people don't understand how this works, but basically there's different objectives, and I've included a PDF copy of the full Airman Certification Standards in the website, so you guys can take a look at it. But this is how you're graded, right? So these are the things that you need to know. The way that it will work on your Checkride is that the examiner will choose 1 knowledge, all of the risk management, and all of the skills, and it's really up to the examiner. Usually they're going to choose all of the risk management. Okay, so what that might look like is, tell me what the privileges and limitations of a private pilot are, and then you would have to then figure out how to explain that to the examiner and what they're asking for. And it says apply requirements to act as PIC under visual flight rules in a scenario given by the evaluator. All right, so there is no mystery in terms of, how you're tested or examined by the FAA. All right. All right, now let's talk about those wonderful FAA medical certification requirements. So they suggest that you do get a medical prior to diving into flight training. Now remember, this is a free course, so there's really no obligation, but before you start spending a lot of money in flight training, I would recommend that you visit and get a FAA medical to make sure that you don't have any issues. You don't want to spend a few $1,000s and then realize that you can't fulfill your dream because there is something that does come up. Now, over the years, they have been a lot more lax, and we have diabetics that fly, we have amputees that fly, we have folks that are colorblind that fly. You used to just be cut off at if you basically weren't in perfect health through the 80s and the 90s, and that's kind of opened up. The FAA medical comes in 3 different types, and then the other one is known as basic med. For those pilots, licensed pilots out there, you may qualify for a basic med if you've had a previous FAA medical. Keep in mind, an FAA medical, you can only get through an aviation medical examiner. One of the links at the very bottom of lesson 1 is an AME, and that's an aviation medical examiner locator. So you can search for a local medical examiner closest to your zip code, and it does have to be FAA approved. There are 3 different types of medicals. What you are required to have is the 3rd class medical, which is this guy right here. We're not going to go into how long they're good for and all that stuff, but basically it is based upon your age. If you're under 40 years of age, then it's good for 60 calendar months. If you're over 40 years of age, it's good for 24 calendar months. The other types of medicals that are available to you are a 2nd class medical, which is for commercial pilots, and a 1st class medical, which is going to be for the airline transport pilots. So think of those folks as kind of like what I do with Compass, where that's Delta, American, even FedEx and UPS. You're going to need a 1st class medical to act as pilot in command. Now, the other thing as well is that if you intend on pursuing an airline career, I'd recommend starting with just getting the 1st class medical out of the way. It's a little bit more stringent than the 3rd class, and it's usually the same price depending on how old you are. Once you hit 40 years of age, and I think at 35 for the first time, they give you an EKG to test your ticker, but it's worthwhile just getting the 1st class, and it's basically the highest of the medicals, and then you won't have to worry about it for a while. But the 1st class does not last as long as a 3rd class medical in the same sense. All right, last things I do want to talk about is the FAA student pilot license. You do need to have a student pilot license prior to your first solo. So when you're with your instructor, you're on their license, you're on their ticket. You will need to get a green plastic card or a temporary card, and it comes in the mail, or the temporary can be printed out on the actual website. So in order to be eligible, you have to meet with a flight instructor, or you can go to a local FAA office. A lot of people try to give these to me at the end of the day, and I can't sign them unless you're physically in front of me, because I need to verify your identity through a government issued card, and I can't do that over the internet. So what I would recommend is if you want this, you need to be at least 16 years of age. Unless you're doing a glider or balloon, then it's 14 years of age. And then you have to have that government issued ID of some type, whether it's a passport, usually for younger students. Then what you can do is you can then go to a local flight school or call the FAA office and make an appointment. And it just takes about 10 minutes for them to certify it, as long as you filled out everything correctly. All right. Back in the day, 10 years ago, your FAA medical used to be your student pilot license, but that's no longer the case. As of 2016, it's a separate process. All right. Where we go from here is you can go to the IACRA website. The IACRA website is the Integrated Airman Certification and Rating Application website, iacra.faa.gov. You can create an account. Just go to the little register button here in the corner. Register yourself, and that is where you can start your student pilot application. And then once you have everything filled out, then you can go to your local flight school. Just go ahead and Google a flight school, and then, you know, I always get an email at the end of this with someone sending me, you know, to certify it. I can't certify it online unless you come to the office. All right. All right. Let's just do with this real quick. Tips on how to complete your training effectively. So you guys are already here. Participate in a ground school. So ground schools taken in conjunction with flight training reinforce skills and enhance learning. What do I mean by that? The airplane is probably the worst place to learn. And there are some flight instructors out there that will throw you in the airplane, and it's a little bit of a disservice. Remember that when you're when you're flying an airplane, it's usually costing over $100 an hour, and plus the instructor. They usually average $180 to $200 an hour for both. All right. If they're trying to teach you while you're flying the airplane, you're only getting 5 or 10% of it, because you at this point are so overwhelmed. So keep in mind that it's a little bit of a disservice. I like to get the ground training done ahead of time, and I usually will give my students some homework to do prior to when they come in. If they've done it, and I can ask them some questions, and we go up and fly. If they haven't, then we'll do a little bit of ground before we go up. Work with your flight instructor and plan ahead. So what I mean by that, as mentioned, is that read and review the materials ahead of time. Don't do it the day before. Anytime that you walk in the door with the flight instructor, just like a lawyer, the clock starts. All right. Wow, $3.50 an hour for Tim in Australia. That's a lot. This is a use it or lose it type environment. So try to fly at least 2 to 3 times per week. The more you fly, the less you forget. It's as simple as that, right? Now, you can complete this in as little as 3 weeks if you really wanted to. That's flying every single day. Most people will complete it in about 2 to 3 months. But the longer you stretch it out, if you stretch it out like to a year, it actually becomes more expensive, just because every time that we do a lesson, if we haven't flown in a week, we spend the first 25 or half, 50% of the lesson going over what you forgot from the previous week. Last thing I can recommend to everyone is stick with traditional training aircraft such as a Cessna or a Piper. The faster, cooler aircraft, yes, they are cooler like the Cirrus and the Diamonds, and they are fantastic aircraft. They take you, there's a little bit more of a learning curve. The avionics are more advanced. Yes, it is glass. It is pretty. It's nice, but it will take you longer to learn. And usually students in the more advanced aircraft, if they don't pick it up quickly, it will usually be another 5 or 10 hours onto the bill. All right. So give me 3 more minutes, guys. I promise. All right. So what can you do with your license? This is a Pilatus. This is a PC-12. So as you can see here, what we are looking for is a single engine airplane license, or an airplane single engine land license. All right. So you could potentially fly this, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Now, we're going to go over the privileges and limitations during the regulations class, which I think is at the end of the week. So don't worry too much about this, but this is your prime thing. So a private pilot is one who can fly for pleasure or personal business without accepting compensation for flying, except in some very limited specific circumstances. So that is when you are basically donating the flight for charity purposes, or you're being reimbursed because it's a business expense. Anything else is going to be commercial activity. So when we fly for hire, and whether that is for basically passengers or cargo, we need to have a commercial license. Other different types of licenses are the sport pilot and the recreational pilot. The recreational pilot, I think there's less than 200 in the US. You're restricted to 50 nautical miles of the airport and some other things. A sport pilot, you're restricted by the weight of the aircraft. Private pilot, if you were to choose out of all of them, I'd recommend the private pilot, but we can get into that here in a minute. So I'm going to ask you guys a fast question here in 1 second, but let's just look at this. The private pilot privileges continued. It allows command of any aircraft for any non-commercial purpose and gives almost unlimited authority to fly under VFR. So VFR is what we consider visual flight rules. It means that you cannot fly inside the clouds quite yet until you get your instrument license. You can carry passengers, but a private pilot may not be compensated in any way for services as a pilot, although passengers can pay what is known as a pro rata share. And a pro rata share is basically splitting the cost evenly between how many people are in the airplane. All right. So with that, I want to make sure everyone's still awake here, especially the folks on the East Coast. So I am going to go give you guys a poll just as a test. This is what you're going to expect as we continue forward. So underneath the chat, there's a poll section. Try not to answer in the chat. It's not fun for everybody. In regards to privileges and limitations, a private pilot may, is it A, not pay less than the pro rata share of the operating expense of a flight with passengers, provided the expenses involve only fuel, oil, airport expenditures, or rental fees? B, act as pilot in command of an aircraft carrying a passenger for compensation if the flight is in connection with the business or employment? Or is it C, not be paid in any manner for the operating expenses of the flight? So I'll give everyone about 60 seconds on this, and then I'll share the results with you. All right. And Zaf and Missy, you know how this goes. Try to answer in the polls. If you guys are not familiar with the polls, I can even do a quick video on it, but the polls are right below the chat section. The reason why we eventually sometimes we'll just have to turn off the chat to make sure that nobody does this. But anyways, what we're going to do throughout the course, and this is the reason why I like this program, this webinar program, is it allows us to basically share these questions with you so that the way the class can basically, see if we're on track and we're understanding the way that the FAA is going to answer those questions. All right. So with that, I've got about 79% of the class, at least in the poll, answering A. I've got 6% with B and 13% with C. So when I end the poll, you guys will be able to see the percentages and see how everyone answered. Now, the correct answer here is actually A. It is not pay less than the pro rata share. Go ahead and circle it for you. Of the operating expenses of a flight with passengers, provided the expenses involve only fuel, oil, airport expenditures, or rental fees. All right. All right. So almost done. When we got our break, got 3 more slides, and it'll be very quick and painless. All right, so what can you fly? So keep in mind that general aviation aircraft come in all sizes. So you'll probably learn, everybody here will probably learn in a single engine aircraft. This is a single engine land, meaning it can land on land. They also have versions of single engine C, which would be a seaplane. In addition to that, if you've got the dough, you can do something faster like a Pilatus, right? And it's the same license, you just need some additional training or endorsements, which we'll talk about in the regulations section. Or if you want to fly a little slower in life, you can do the MetLife blimp, right? The blimps need pilots as well, right? And that's a different type that's called a lighter than air license. The other licenses and ratings that are available to you, and this is the general order of the way most people would proceed. We are all here for the private pilot or some type of version of the private pilot or sport pilot. The private pilot allows you to fly. The instrument rating allows you to fly in the clouds in sole reference to the actual, to your instruments. The commercial, that's when you can actually start getting paid for what you do. If you have any inkling of teaching, that is what is the CFI, the Certified Flight Instructor. Now, to get from private pilot to commercial, you need 250 hours of flight time. There is no hour requirement for certified flight instructor except that you have your commercial. Now, for those of you that have or do not like teaching, just don't become a flight instructor. It's not worth it. You're going to do a disservice to the students unless you enjoy this. All right. If you want to fly as pilot in command for any airline, Southwest, Delta, American, anything else in between, UPS, FedEx, any of those, you're going to need what we call an ATP, which is an airline transport pilot license, which is what I have. And it's a minimum of 1,500 hours in order to get that. Now, most people are, once you get your commercial, most people are not paying for the flight time. That's when they're actually getting paid by a company in order to do that. Okay. All right, so with that, I appreciate everyone sticking in there a little bit longer than I want it to be, but well, let's do this. Let's take a 10-minute break. It is right now, it's about 20 minutes past. Let's call it, we'll come back at 6:30 or 30 minutes past the hour, and we'll do a 10-minute break. Then what we'll do is we'll dig into the aircraft components, and then we'll get into the aerodynamics. There are... what I'll do is I'll also put in the sticky chat the link for, go ahead and remove that, sorry guys. I'll put in the link for the offer. It's still available. And then both the ultimate and the private pilot are both on there. If you scroll down, there's the single payment option, or if you want to pay over a given period of time, you can go ahead and click on the 3 monthly payments. And then the first 90, we've got 91 spots left for the 1 hour free ground lesson. All right. So I appreciate you guys sticking in there. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, stretch your legs, throw on that microwave dinner, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. All right. All right, everyone, welcome back. I do, hopefully you guys got a quick break in there with an extra minute. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna get into the aircraft components. So like I said, with the server, I did actually just get off the phone with them, and they're looking at it. So like I said, it's just a lot of people just trying to log in at once. So if you guys spread it out just a little bit, it's not that critical that you're in there at this given moment, okay? So let's get into the aircraft components and aerodynamics section here. So there are 5 different components of most aircraft out there, all right? So they make up what is known as obviously our power plant, which is at the very front of the engine. And the power plant in this case for most of us are gonna be some type of propeller driven or air driven. We have the landing gear. So in this case, this is a fixed gear. The fuselage is the main component where basically the cockpit and the passengers sit. We have the wings, and the wings are basically what gives us the lift in this case. And then the empennage, and the empennage is made up of the vertical stabilizer, which is this portion, and the horizontal stabilizer. Yeah, we'll go ahead and make sure that the quiz is available to everyone prior to doing it, okay? So this works in the exact same way, whether we're talking about a small general aviation aircraft or if we were talking about something a little bit larger, such as the C-130. Now, let's go ahead and look at this in the same context of a C-130, right? We have the cockpit and the fuselage. The fuselage is the entire body of the aircraft. We have our power plant, which in this case, there's 4 different engines or 4 power plants. We have our wings, which are providing us lift at this point. Then, in addition to that, at the very back, we have what is known as the empennage. So the empennage is this entire section here, and it's made up of the vertical stabilizer, which is this guy. And then we've got the horizontal stabilizer, as stated, which basically moves, it is horizontal. Now, the other portion, of course, that's not being shown is the gear. This one has a retractable gear system, but the aircraft components, as mentioned, remain the same. Now, the way that these work in terms of if we're looking at a 3-axis system is we call this roll, yaw, and pitch, all right? So there's 3 different axes. There's the longitudinal axis, the lateral axis, and the vertical axis. So our wings, in this case, what we have when we're rolling in a rolling motion, it is controlled by our ailerons, all right? So when we move the yoke right or left, it moves the aileron up or down, and that basically allows us to turn to the right or to the left, or what is known as roll. When we look at pitch, which is basically pointing the nose up towards the sky or down towards the ground, we use our elevator, which is at the very back. Our elevators are located right there in the back along the horizontal stabilizer. And the other one, ailerons, are located on either side of the wing on the actual wing itself, okay? Then the final axis is our vertical axis, and this controls yaw. So this is our rudder, and our rudder is along our vertical stabilizer as shown, and it moves in a yawing position. It kind of moves right and left, but it's slightly different in the way that it acts, all right? We'll look at each one of these in more detail here, okay? So let's look at those. As mentioned, let's look at the first one here, which is going to be our pitch. So what we have is at the very back of this is our horizontal stabilizer. And what ends up happening is there's a little, it's called an elevator. And as we can see here, this elevator in a neutral position or a down position will basically have an effect or pitch up or down the nose of the aircraft. So by raising that elevator, it forces the tail down and it basically forces the nose up, okay? When it's in the neutral position, that's basically where we're just not going to climb or descend. And then when it is in the down position, then it is forcing the tail up because we have air that's going through it. And then that basically has the nose in the down position, all right? The next one that we also want to look at is going to be those ailerons. So the ailerons are generally on the back side of the wing, and on the back side of the wing, this would be the wing section here. This last little part would be the aileron. And the ailerons move in opposite directions of each other. So if the aileron was up on this side of the wing, then it would be down fully on the opposite side of the wing, all right? So they move in opposite directions. So the trailing position is kind of just a neutral position. That would be if we're not rolling or making any turns at this point. Then we've got, if we were to lower the aileron, moving that aileron down, what will end up happening is that it will increase the lift and raise that wing. It will only raise one side of the wing. What ends up happening is on the opposite side of the wing, remember that they are counter to each other. So if one is fully down, the other side is up. And when it's up, it's actually decreasing the airflow over the wing, which means it loses lift. So what's ending up happening is there's more lift on this side of the wing right here, and there is less lift on the opposite side of the wing, which basically makes this wing drop down and this one go up, okay? The last one that we're going to look at is the rudder. So this is a top-down view of the rudder. And yep, Glenn, you can use port or starboard if you really want to. The rudder is giving us that yaw position. So the rudder, it's difficult to see, but the rudder is situated right here. And if we were looking at it, what we have is the rudder will deflect in the neutral position. It basically sits perfectly neutral and straight back. We can deflect the rudder right or left, and we do this by using our foot pedals. And if we basically step on our right foot pedal, then it will move the rudder to the right, and so forth. And then it will give you that opposite force. Okay, so that's basically keeping us coordinated, which we'll talk a little bit more about in future lessons. But that is the general, we don't really talk very much about how to fly an airplane. That's the general controls of the airplane. All right. So with that, before we actually dig into the aerodynamics section, I'm going to give you guys a very easy 7-minute video here. It's going to talk about the basics of aerodynamics, and then we'll dig into it and talk about it in more particulars. So let's go ahead and throw that up.
If you have ever flown on an airplane, you know that it's an enormous-sized, amazing machine. A typical 747 can carry more than 500 passengers and weighs around 800,000 pounds when taking off. Yet it rolls down the runway at a speed of 290 kilometers per hour and, as though by magic, lifts itself into the air and can travel up to 13,000 kilometers without stopping. Incredible, isn't it? Today, we are going to learn how an airplane flies in a very simple way by going through the aerodynamics of an airplane, the main parts of an airplane, and controlling the airplane. The aerodynamics of an airplane. The 4 aerodynamics of an airplane are drag, thrust, weight, and lift. Drag, also called air resistance, refers to the forces acting opposite to the relative motion of any object moving with respect to a surrounding fluid. The energy it takes to push through the surrounding fluid creates drag. You may have noticed an excellent example of drag reduction in track cycling. The cyclist must push through the mass of air in front, but a streamlined sitting posture that cuts through the air more smoothly enables a cyclist to travel much faster, with less effort. The airplane always retracts its landing gear and nose gear into the body of the plane after takeoff to reduce drag. Thrust counters drag. It is a mechanical force that keeps the airplane moving in the air. Thrust is generated by propellers, jet engines, or rockets. The compressor inside the jet engine takes the air and compresses it, and after processing from the combustion chamber and turbine, the gas is blown out through the exhaust nozzle. Here, Newton's third law of motion is applied, where the gas is pushed backward and the engine is pushed forward. Weight is the airplane body, passenger, and luggage weight in total. Lift overcomes the weight and holds the airplane in the air. Lift is created mostly by wings to keep the plane aloft. So, to keep the airplane moving, flying straight, and level, this must be true, which means no net force acting upon an airplane. In any case, if drag is greater than thrust, the plane slows down. If thrust is greater than drag, the plane moves faster. If weight is greater than lift, the plane descends. If lift is greater than weight, the plane climbs. Parts of an airplane. The basic parts of an airplane are 1. Wings, 2. Horizontal stabilizer, and 3. Vertical stabilizer. The wing is the most important part of an airplane, since it produces lift that allows a plane to fly. A wing produces lift because of its slightly inclined and special shape, which is called an airfoil. This special shape is designed to deflect the air at the bottom of the wing due to more air strikes at the bottom and less air at the top of the wing. As the airplane rolls down the runway, higher pressure and more upward force produces below the wing, and lower pressure and lesser downward force above the wing. The net result is the lifting of an airplane. Stabilizer. Stability in an airplane is a tendency to return to its initial state after a disturbance from that state. Horizontal stabilizer performs this function when the disturbance force causes the nose of an airplane to move up or down. Such movement is called pitch. Vertical stabilizer provides stability for a disturbance in yaw. Yaw is side-to-side motion of the nose. Controlling the airplane. So what are the components in an airplane which control the flight, direction, and height, and maintain the equilibrium? It's elevator, rudder, and aileron. The elevator can be deflected up or down to produce a change in the downforce produced by the horizontal tail. If the elevator is deflected upward, it increases the downforce produced by the horizontal tail, causing the nose to pitch upward. If the elevator is deflected downward, then the counteracting force causes the nose to pitch down. The rudder can be deflected to either side to produce a change in the side force produced by the vertical tail. If the rudder is deflected towards the right, it creates a side force to the left, which causes the nose to yaw to the right. If the rudder is deflected towards the left, it creates a side force to the right, which causes the nose to yaw to the left. Ailerons are located on the tips of each wing. Ailerons can be used to generate a rolling motion for an aircraft. Ailerons usually work in opposition. If the right aileron is deflected upward, then left is deflected downward, and vice versa. Let's see this. To curve the flight path, the pilot deflects one wing to move up and the other wing to move down by controlling the ailerons. With the left aileron in downwards direction, the lift will increase, whereas at the same time, the aileron of the right wing is in the upward position. Therefore, lift on the right wing is decreased. The result will roll the aircraft to the right. If the pilot reverses the aileron deflection, right aileron down, left up, the right wing will lift up and the airplane will roll to the left. The next time you travel in an airplane, you'll know how it works. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to my channel for more videos.
All right, so that is the basics, just kind of reiterating what we talked about there before. So let's go back. I'm going to go ahead and switch this real quick here. Got a fast test question here for you that's going to correlate with the slides on the aerodynamics, and this is going to talk about the purpose of the rudder. So once again, let's try our best to answer in the actual poll. I'm going to go ahead and start the poll right now. What is the purpose of the rudder on an airplane? Is it A, to control yaw, B, to control overbanking tendency, or C, to control roll? Try to answer in the chat. Or if you really want to answer in the chat, you can do private. But what I'm going to do is I just muted the chat, so hopefully that'll prevent anybody from doing anything. Try to use the poll. Poll is right beneath the chat function. All right, great job, everybody. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the chat back on, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So we've got 96% of the class with A, 1% with B, 2% with C. Correct answer here, purpose of the rudder on an airplane is to control yaw. So that is the whole purpose, all right? So let's go ahead and continue with our aerodynamics lesson. So as we can see here, this is basically a airfoil. An airfoil is just a wing, and this is inside of a wind tunnel. So as you can see here, we'll talk about specifically how lift is produced. But if you were to think about it, or if I were to give you the simplest sense in terms of what makes an airplane fly, imagine that we have two air molecules, and we've got one molecule that it has to hit what is known as the leading edge, and both air molecules have to meet at the trailing edge basically at the same time, right? So one is gonna split and go on the top portion of the airfoil, and one is gonna go underneath, and they have to meet at the exact same point in time. So we'll dig into this a little bit more, but the top one is going to speed up because it has a further distance to travel, and the bottom one is going to remain that same speed. But before that, we're going to do some basic physics. Hopefully everyone remembers who Newton was. There's three different laws that we worry about. So Newton's first law, and I will promise you guys, I got very creative when I created this slide deck almost 2.5, 3 years ago. This is the only slide deck that is color coded. I'm just checking your color vision, if you will. None of the other ones are like this. It's not as annoying. It just took way too much time, okay? Newton's first law, every object will remain uniform unless acted upon by an external force. So basically an airplane will move when a force is applied to it, right? So if we push something, whether we're pushing a ball or anything across our desk, then it will move. The second law is going to be force equals the mass times acceleration. This is the whole example of this is the more force applied, the faster it goes. Okay, so if we put a jet engine on something, it's obviously going to move a lot faster than a prop on the same device. And the most important one that we're going to talk about is Newton's third law, which is for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And what we're going to talk about towards the end of the class here is that these airplanes, these propeller-driven airplanes, have a left-hand turning tendency, meaning that the airplane naturally wants to move to the left because of this equal and opposite reaction. And there's a few different left-hand turning tendencies that we'll talk about, including P factor, all right? Then we're going to talk about a gentleman who is Bernoulli, or Bernoulli's principle. And this is a very simple thing. So what this individual did a couple hundred years ago was he basically looked at air pressure and put it through a venturi. Now, a venturi is basically a tube that's getting squished at the bottom, as you can see here. The air is forced through this tube and it narrows at the center. So what happens to the air that's passing over the curved part of the airplane wing is what this represents, okay? So what ends up happening is the big key here is that the velocity of the moving air is actually going to go faster, okay? So when it tries to go through this venturi, what will end up happening is the pressure will decrease, but the velocity will increase, right? So pressure will decrease, and the velocity, the speed of that air will increase when it goes through a smaller opening, all right? So as we stated at the beginning, when we're looking or talking about lift or what makes an airplane fly, we have these upper and lower surfaces. So if we were to look at it and have those two air molecules, and we've got molecule A and molecule B here, well, they have to meet at the very back end at the exact same moment. But if we took a string and measured the distance from the top or the bottom, what we would notice is that the top part, which is known as camber, that's the curvature of the wing, molecule A has a further distance to travel to get to the back of the wing versus molecule B, which has a shorter distance. Because of that, it has this low pressure and it actually starts to increase in speed. That increase in speed and that low pressure is what gives us lift. That's probably the easiest way that I can explain it, all right? So when we're talking about the shape of a wing, this is what we call camber. So the camber, this is the upper camber, which is the shape of this top portion. Then we have a lower camber, which is the shape of the bottom portion, all right? The lower surface has less camber, so it's basically, as you can see, roughly a straight line versus look at the curvature of the upper portion of the airfoil, and that's the reason why we get that lower pressure. So we get a faster speed on top and a lower pressure, and on the bottom we get a slower speed and a higher pressure. What that creates at the end of the day is lift, and lift is what basically lifts us off the ground, okay? The way that these are designed and the way that it was created is lift. You'll hear this thing, Rod likes to use this a lot, the wing is the thing. The wing is the thing that allows us to fly. It's the shape of that wing that allows us to develop lift and to fly the airplane. And there are a multitude of different shapes of wings out there. We've seen some that kind of defy the laws of gravity, especially in the experimental planes that NASA used to put together. All this is an airfoil at the end of the day, all right? So an airfoil is just a shape of something, and it could be a propeller, it could be the wing, it does not matter, but it's that airfoil shape of that wing that's creating lift, and as the speed builds, that's what lifts the actual airplane off the ground. And then those control surfaces that we talked about before, such as the ailerons and the elevator and the rudder, are what allow us, the actual pilots, to control the aircraft, okay? When we're saying meeting, what we mean by meeting is that if in an imaginary world, if we had two air molecules, one here, and they're at the leading edge of the wing, they both have to meet at the trailing edge of the wing, meaning that they have to travel a distance in order to get from point A to point B, all right? All right, let's go ahead and look at the parts of the wing here. If we were to, we obviously have a leading edge. The leading edge is the very front part of the wing. And then at the back, we have something called a trailing edge, which is the back part of the wing. The upper camber is the shape of the upper portion of the wing here. And then the lower camber is that shape of the lower portion of the wing. If we were to draw an imaginary line between the trailing edge and the leading edge, which is representative of this dashed line, that is what is known as the chord line. So the chord line is this imaginary dashed line from the leading edge to the trailing edge is considered the chord line. If we were to extend the chord line out indefinitely from the front of that wing, then what we have is the relative wind, which is hitting the front of the actual leading edge. The angle between the relative wind and the chord line is known as the angle of attack, all right? This is the big one. So this is an FAA test question. The difference, they're going to ask you to define angle of attack. So angle of attack is the difference between the relative wind and the chord line, or the angle between the relative wind and the chord line. We'll look at it in a little bit more detail, all right? All right, so looking at the 5 components of a wing that we need to know as a private pilot, let's review the chord line first. So the leading edge is the front part of the wing, and the trailing edge is the back part of the wing. If we were to draw that imaginary line from the leading edge to the trailing edge, that is known as the chord line. Okay. The upper cambered surface is the upper portion, and the lowered cambered surface is the lower portion. Now, the angle of attack, when we look at it, is the angle between the chord line and where the relative wind or the wind is hitting that actual airplane. Now, anytime that we exceed the angle of attack, then lift is basically not, you're going to start to stall the airplane, and we'll get into a stall here in a minute, but that is where we basically start to lose lift because it's not going to follow the smooth airflow over the wing, but that's a couple slides away, all right? So with that, let me ask you a question about Bernoulli. Make sure that everybody's still here. All right, so which statement relates to Bernoulli's principle? Is it A, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction? Is it B, an additional upward force is generated as the lower surface of the wing deflects air downward? Or is it C, air traveling faster over the curved upper surfaces of an airfoil cause lower pressure on the top surfaces? Yep, and that's more of a figurative thing. It's very easy to explain. You know, obviously air molecules are not meeting in real life. It's just a very simplistic way of thinking about it, where one air molecule, you know, it's kind of like a children's book, right? One air molecule has a greater distance to travel than another. And if it has a greater distance to travel and it needs to be at the same, I don't know, bus station, if you will, or train station as the slower moving molecule. It's got to go faster, right? That's a very simple explanation, but as mentioned, it is just more of a figurative speech, right? It's not a literal interpretation. As you guys notice, I did turn off the chat to make sure I can condition you guys and gals out there to use the poll if you can. All right, so let's go ahead and go through the answer here. The correct answer is C. It's air traveling faster over the curved upper surface of the airfoil causes lower pressure on the top surface, right? The lower pressure on top gives us that lift because we have a higher pressure on bottom. So 88% of the class got that correct, right? Got one more FAA test question for you, and then I will give you the chat back here in just a moment. So the term angle of attack is defined as what? As the angle between A, between the wing chord line and the relative wind, B, between the airplane's climb angle and the horizon, or C, formed by the longitudinal axis of the airplane and the chord line of the wing. And I'm going to share a couple extra files that I forgot to give you guys earlier. One is how to get a student license and basic med for anyone that's interested, that's already current licensed pilot. It's been out of it for a little while. All right, so got about 91% of the class that's following along. So the correct answer here is A. It's between the wing chord line and the relative wind. Remember, the chord line is that imaginary line from the leading edge to the trailing edge. We never really talked about anything that says longitudinal axis of the airplane and the chord line, and it's not the airplane's climb angle. We need to use the proper terminology and the horizon, which we've never talked about either. All right, so good job, everyone. Let's go ahead and continue. Let me go ahead and unmute the chat. That way it's a little bit easier than people trying to answer. All right, so let's talk about the aerodynamics of flight. So we talked about what creates lift and how lift is created. Now what we want to do is look at the four basic principles that are, or forces that are acting upon the airplane. So we've talked about lift. Weight is the next one, and weight is obviously the weight of the airplane itself. We have drag, and then we have thrust, which is usually from our power plant of some type. So each one of these is broken into a specific topic that we'll cover. And one of the other questions that they usually ask is, when are all of these forces equal? So if all of these forces are equal, it's in straight, unaccelerated level flight. Straight, unaccelerated level flight. That is when all these forces are equal. Now, the way that these change are based upon our power, climb, angle, and airspeed, all right? So what we have here is that it is dependent upon how much power we use, and when we look at it, even with the full throttle or maximum power, the airplane is going to slow down as it basically attempts a steeper climb, right? So as we can see here in the bottom, if we are in airplane A in straight level flight with full power, we're going to get a very fast airspeed. If we start to pitch the nose up with full power, that airspeed starts to decrease. And if we keep climbing or steepen that climb angle, it will start to decrease even further. The airspeed will start to decay or get rid of it, okay? All right, so let's talk about the first one, which is thrust. Okay, so thrust is provided by the engine. And what it is the engine has the propeller on it. Remember, a propeller is just another version of an airfoil, and that propeller is converting that power into thrust and it's pulling the airplane forward, okay? The thrust is acting parallel to the longitudinal axis. However, it's not always the case. We'll talk about that in the next slide here. So that is what thrust is. The next one we want to talk about is drag. So drag is the opposite of thrust. And there's two different types of drag, or two different basic types of drag that we're going to talk about. Drag is just something that resists the movement of the actual airplane itself, okay? So the two types of drag that we're going to be discussing in this class are known as parasite drag, or parasitic drag, if you will. And then we have induced drag. So within each one of these, there are subcomponents or smaller versions of drag as we go along as well. Okay, So parasitic drag or parasite drag is basically not associated with the production of lift, and it increases as airspeed increases, okay? So these are things that naturally stick out from the wing. So this could be, bolts, screws, anything that's basically disturbing the airflow going around or over either the wings or the aircraft, right? So the faster that we go, the more parasite drag that we have. Induced drag is slightly different. So as airspeed decreases, what we have here is that it's inverse with our airspeed. So drag caused by the same factors that produce lift, its amount varies inversely with airspeed. So, and I'll show you what the drag lift curve looks like here in a second to kind of put it in perspective. It's gonna be a little bit easier to look at that way. All right, let's look at parasitic drag first. So there's a few different types. We have form drag, which is a version of parasite drag. So this is anything that sticks out into the airstream. This could be wheels, antennas, rivets, just anything at all. We have interference drag, which comes from the intersections of airstreams that cause eddies, currents, turbulence, and restricts any type of smooth airflow. This could be at an intersection where, let's say, the wing and the fuselage meet. So that's what we call interference drag. And then we have something called skin friction drag, and this is just the any type of resistance due to the contact of moving air with the surface of the aircraft. Actually, if you don't wax your airplane, it can, by actually waxing the airplane, you can actually increase your airspeed by about five knots or so, just because it gets rid of that skin drag. If we were to look at a drag curve, and this is where people sometimes get lost, in parasitic drag is all of the drag that we're talking about, things that stick out, the nuts, the bolts, everything that basically sticks out along the way. So if this is 0 airspeed and this is 130 knots over here, what ends up happening is the faster that we go, this initial line is that parasitic drag is pretty much at nothing when we're just sitting in the airplane, not going anywhere. As we speed up, what ends up happening is that parasitic drag starts to increase, and it's increasing because of the fact that the faster that we go, all those nuts and bolts and the antennas and everything else that we talked about, it's now affecting it even more. The opposite of that is known as induced drag. So induced drag starts off very, very high when we're just sitting on the ramp, but it actually decreases with airspeed. So it's actually the inverse. So that's what we mean. It's the opposite. So as we go faster, the induced drag decreases, but the parasite drag increases. You got another hour, Catherine. If anybody needs to go, it's all recorded, so you guys can watch it, all right? So what we have here is we're going to talk about the reverse command and positive command. We'll talk about that in the next slide, just to kind of show you what this looks like. So there's something called the region of reverse command, and what this is that this is what ends up happening. You're going to hear this a lot from your flight instructor of you either need to, you're behind the power curve and all this stuff. If we're looking at airplane number 1, and this relates to that drag curve that we just looked at, in this example, in order to maintain whatever altitude that this airplane is at, it's going to have to keep that power setting of 1900 RPMs. And at 1900 RPMs, the aircraft is able to maintain the altitude and an airspeed of 74 knots. What ends up happening, though, is that once we get to the backside of the power curve, and remember, the backside of the power curve is this red area where we don't want to be in, okay? When we get to the backside of the power curve, if I don't do anything, meaning that I keep the same power setting at 1900 RPMs, then my nose is going to start to increase, my angle of attack is going to start to increase, and you'll notice that my speed went from 74 knots down to 53 knots, and now my airplane is descending at 500 feet per minute. In order to maintain your altitude when you're on the backside of the power curve, you need almost full power, and in this case, this airplane is now full power, 2600 RPMs, and it's at 53 knots. So the reason why we talk about this is this is that drag curve that we looked at before, okay? So, yep, all other forces remaining consistent, yep. So drag is the price that is paid to obtain lift. What we always talk about is the lift to drag ratio, which is the amount of lift generated by an airfoil compared to its actual drag. And then the lift to drag ratio is going to show airfoil efficiency. And we always call these an LD ratio, which is basically whatever is most efficient for that specific airplane. So when we look at a drag curve, what we have is as the speed increases, as we talked about, which is going to be right here, we have, this is the parasitic drag line. As speed increases, the parasitic drag will start to increase exponentially. You'll see that the drag goes up pretty high. The induced drag, though, which is over here, is actually working the opposite. So as we increase in speed, the induced drag is going down. What we have in the red line, which is known as total drag, is basically whatever the total between the parasitic and induced drag is. This is what we call our total drag, okay? So the bottom of the drag curve is always going to be the most efficient speed at which the airfoil can generate maximum lift and minimum drag. So right here where these two cross, and this is right there, where the parasitic drag and the induced drag meet, that is our most efficient, where we generate maximum lift and minimum drag. And this is what will also, this is our speed that the manufacturers give us for our maximum glide distance. So if we ever lost an engine, you're going to have an airspeed that you want to fly. And the airspeed is basically right where that meets the parasitic drag and the induced drag. And that will basically give you the furthest distance, if you will. Yep, it will count as your attendance. Thank you. All right, so if we were to look at this in another way, just kind of giving you a few different visual options to see how this works. As mentioned, your max range, which is the furthest distance that you can go, is where the parasitic drag and the induced drag meet. On the other hand, if we're kind of toward the back side of the power curve, which is over here, this is what is considered max endurance. So what we have is, this is kind of just an example. You don't need to know this. You know, we have aeronautical engineers that calculate all these numbers, and this is how they're calculating it, all right? All right, let's talk about weight. And if you're having trouble connecting, go ahead and just kind of, you can basically exit out and then go back, all right? As I said, it will always happen. It's just something that naturally happens because it's technology, okay? All right, let's look at weight. So weight is the next thing. Remember, weight counters lift. So weight is the combined load of the aircraft itself. So this is when we talk about crew, fuel, cargo, anything that's basically the weight of the aircraft, right? And it's the downward force of that airplane that's caused by gravity, which is opposing lift. So lift is the important one. Weight is the one that counteracts it. And weight is always acting straight down towards Earth. So keep that in mind. The next one we talked about a little bit, which is lift. Remember, lift counteracts weight. So lift is opposing the downward force of weight and is produced by the dynamic effect of air acting on the airfoil. So remember, the air going over the top part of the wing is moving faster, and it's a lower pressure than the air on the bottom side of the wing, which is a higher pressure, and it is moving slower. So by doing that, that is producing lift, all right? So we all good so far? So those are the four forces. The four forces are equal in unaccelerated level flight. That's one of your FAA test questions. The next thing that we're going to talk about is wingtip vortices. So wingtip vortices are created any time that we are creating lift. So anytime that lift is created, it's almost a byproduct of lift. And what it is this spiraling airflow that basically extends off of the wingtips. I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So if we were to look at a wingtip vortice, this is what it would look like, and you're not going to be able to see it unless you'll usually see this if airplanes fly through clouds or fog or something like that. And what it is it's basically this spiraling airflow that comes off of the wingtips. All right. Now, the reason why wingtip vortices are so important is that this is where we usually get something called wake turbulence, right? If you've ever been flying on a commercial airplane and you're coming into land and you start to feel the airplane start to have some turbulence close to the ground, it's probably because it's flying behind an airplane that's creating this, all right? So here's just another version of it. As we can see, we've got that, this is a version of aerodynamic drag, but we'll talk about the specific formations of the vortices. But remember that any of these wingtip vortices are going to pose a hazard to aircraft, especially during the landing and takeoff phases of flight. Okay, so keep that in mind. So it's going to be the most crucial when we're taking off and landing. Now, the strength of the vortices is a function of the aircraft's size, speed, and configuration. So what we usually like to say is that aircraft that are heavy, slow, and clean are going to create the strongest wingtip vortices. So heavy, just think of a heavy airplane. So a Boeing 747 or an Airbus A380 is the heaviest that we have, right? When it's slow, it is creating the most amount of wingtip vortices. So think about it, when are aircraft slow? They're slow when they take off and when they land. And in a clean configuration means that the wing flaps and the gears are retracted, meaning that there's nothing sticking out. If we set a dirty configuration, that would be when the gear's down and the flaps are down. So when we take off, that is probably the worst position where it's heavy, slow, and clean, because the airplane has already brought up its flaps and it's also brought up its landing gear. It's still just as bad on landing, though, so keep that in mind. Now, the reason why we're talking about the formation of wingtip vortices is it leads to this thing called wake turbulence, all right? So wake turbulence is what causes turbulence in the air when we're following behind these vortices, and this is what can really affect us as small general aviation pilots. And even when I was flying the Embraer 175, when we were flying behind certain airplanes, this thing, it just kind of rocks you back and forth, and it kind of does weird things, especially going into LA all the time. Now, what air traffic controllers will do is it's their responsibility to give you separation during takeoff and landings at controlled fields. And with that, it used to be based on time. Now it's actually based on distance, and that's something that the air traffic controllers will deal with. Now, what's important to note is that the wingtip vortices, as stated, occur anytime that we have lift, right? So anytime that we're following an airplane, the wingtip vortices that are coming off this airplane are going to start to basically descend at 500 to 1,000 feet per minute. So you do not want to be flying your small airplane in that general area within about 1,000 feet of the same altitude, okay? Now, the next thing is how do we avoid this type of scenario? So obviously, we don't want to be within 1,000 feet of the same altitude behind a larger aircraft. And, if we're flying a small Cessna, it could potentially be, let's say, a business jet that we're following. So what we have here is at the bottom, this is kind of the two things that you absolutely need to know, is we want to rotate prior to the point at which the preceding aircraft rotated when taking off behind another aircraft. So what we mean by that is that when we are taking off, you can see that in this picture, the airplane is taking off and it's starting to create that wake. So what we want to do is we want to rotate or start taking off before the point that other airplane took off. So that way we can avoid it. Now, when we're coming into land, we want to touch down after the airplane touched down. So you can see where the wake turbulence is, where this airplane landed. So what we want to do is we want to come in and touch down beyond the point that they actually touched down. And that will help us avoid wake turbulence. All right. Now, wake turbulence is another thing, especially when we deal with parallel runways, because wake turbulence is going to move whichever way the wind blows. So the wind could help us in some sense, or it could hurt us. Okay. All right. Let's look at ground effect. So ground effect is basically where we have this artificial improvement in performance, right? It's going to allow us to get off the ground a little bit earlier than what is really possible. And what I mean by that is that we have rotation speeds, meaning when we're gonna pull back on the yoke, and we usually need to keep or maintain a specific speed in order to keep lift, right? We need to counter that weight by creating that lift force. So let's look at ground effect here. So Ground effect, as mentioned, is that artificial improvement in performance, if you will, and it's usually going to be within one wingspan of the ground. So for most of the general aviation aircraft, you're going to experience it within about 10 to 15 feet, depending on how big your wings are, of the ground. And this happens when you're taking off and or landing. So what it is it's simply a reduction in that induced drag. And the reason why is that we have that airflow from the aircraft, and normally that airflow is basically, just kind of falling off that airplane. But what ends up happening, I'll go back to the other slide, is now it's actually hitting the ground, and it's basically providing this cushion that's kind of holding you up, if you will, right? And those wingtip vortices, the upwash and the downwash, are really what's giving you that ground effect, okay? We'll look at a few different examples to kind of explain it a little bit, a couple different ways, okay? So when we look at our performance outside of ground effect, this is important to kind of look at. And once again, this is from the Rod Machado book, so I like some of his slides just because it breaks it down. What we're going to do is we're going to look at how the airplane operates or performs when it's not in ground effect, and then we'll compare it to when it is in ground effect, okay? So as we know, we've got lift and drag, right? And the downwash bends, which is basically, we can follow these red lines here. These red lines are what we call this downward bend. So as you can see, it's basically kind of creating a downward bend, and get rid of that. The wingtip vortices create that downwash, which is helping tilt the total lifting force. So total lifting force is this big blue thing right here, okay? Now let's see how that compares. Now, as you can see, that wingtip vortice and the downwash and the upwash and all of these different things is not affected because we don't have the ground directly below us, so it doesn't really create that cushion. So if we look at it and place that airplane closer to the ground, what we have here is that now it's actually starting to hit the ground. It's creating that cushioning effect, if you will. But the biggest thing here is look at where the total lift is. The total lift kind of moves forward on the wing versus where it was at before. It was actually a little bit further back on the wing when we looked at it in ground effect. So the way that this changes our pitch, if you will, is it's dependent upon obviously where we are. So if we're in ground effect or we're not in ground effect. So when we're talking about the downwash, let's look at the first one. So in position A, we need to hold, the nose is kind of held up by this wing performance, right? Out of ground effect. So what we have is the airflow comes up, over, and it's hitting the back of that vertical or horizontal stabilizer. And that is pushing that tail, which is giving us that nose up. When we get into ground effect, what ends up happening is that downwash that we would normally expect to have diminishes or decreases once it gets into ground effect, and it's no longer really pushing that tail down. So naturally what's going to end up happening is the nose is going to want to come down, right? So that's how the pitch changes. Now, that is above and beyond what you need to know, but I will give you the test question. And with that test question, what is ground effect? All right, let me go ahead and bring up the poll here. Just what is the definition of ground effect? Try to answer in the poll, please. Is it A, the result of the interference of the surface of the earth with the airflow patterns about an airplane? B, the result of an alteration in airflow patterns increasing induced drag about the wings of an airplane? Or C, the result of the disruption of the airflow patterns about the wing of the airplane to the point where the wings no longer support the airplane in flight? If you really want to answer in the chat, make it a private, just make it private so you don't have to send it to everybody, guys. I guess I'll have to put a tutorial out for how to answer on polls. All right, so the correct answer here is A. So we got about 81% of the class with the correct answer. It is A in this case. It's the result of interference of the surface of the Earth with the airflow patterns about the airplane, okay? So that ground effect, remember, is that result of the interference because now we're putting the surface of the Earth beneath the airplane, and that's what's screwing with these airflow patterns, all right? Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is stall. So we talked about what produces lift. Let's look at what is actually happening when we stall an airplane. So a stall is really just a rapid decrease in lift, all right? It's a rapid decrease in lift. So normally what ends up happening is we use these fancy words, which is like smooth laminar airflow. So what we can see here in number 1 is we've got this nice smooth laminar airflow, meaning that there's really no separation. The airflow is following the curvature of the wing, and what ends up happening is that everything's going where it needs to be, all right? So when we get a rapid decrease in lift, what ends up happening is it's caused by the separation of the airflow from the wing surface, and this occurs anytime that we exceed the critical angle of attack. So remember that we can stall a wing or an airplane in this case anytime that we at any point in time. We can stall it at any airspeed, fast or slow, at any pitch or bank angle. We can actually have a stall occur, all right? It's very important to realize that. The whole reason why a stall occurs is that we exceed what is known as the critical angle of attack, okay? Most of the time for most airplanes out there, it's somewhere between 18 to 22 degrees. So when you basically pitch up enough, you're gonna have the difference between, remember, we've got that imaginary chord line and the relative wind, and the difference or the angle between the two is known as the critical angle of attack. So what ends up happening is when we exceed that critical angle of attack, we start to have this little interference, if you will. That's what all these little red things are, and it's kind of like burbles, okay? And what ends up happening is that smooth airflow no longer exists. So what ends up happening is that it starts to separate from the wing, and as it separates from the wing, that is where we start to lose lift and the wing starts to stall. Now, in a stall, the wing does not totally stop producing lift. It's just not producing adequate lift or enough lift to counter gravity. Now, on most training aircraft out there, if we were to look at a fuselage and a wing that kind of looks like this, they will stall from the inside, the interior portion, or the inboard portion, and then they'll work their way outwards. On transport category aircraft like Boeing and Airbus, it actually stalls at the wing tip, and then it works its way to the fuselage. So it's important to understand how your airplane stalls. All right, so the stalling speed of an aircraft is never going to be a fixed value. It's dependent upon it will always stall at the same angle of attack, regardless of airspeed, weight, load factor, or density altitude. So, so the critical angle of attack, is the angle, right? So if we were to look in an airfoil, it is the difference between the chord line, the angle between the chord line and what is the relative wind, okay? So that's known as a critical angle of attack. So the angle of attack is where the airflow separates from the surface or the upper surface of the wing, and that's what causes the stall, okay? So as mentioned, I don't really go with 16. I usually say 18 to 22 degrees is usually where the aircraft designs will occur. And the biggest thing is that it can occur at low speed, high speed, or in turn. So it can occur at any point in time, all right? We call it a critical because it's basically at that point where it's critical. It can't produce lift anymore, or it can't produce enough lift. So let's look at these 3 different events. We've got a low speed, a high speed, and a turning. So in a low speed, this is when we're practicing stalls, or this could occur when we're basically either taking off or landing and we're not paying attention to our airspeed, right? The lower the airspeed, the higher we must increase the nose up pitch in order to maintain that altitude, right? So when we start pitching up, that's what increases the angle of attack. Now, the high speed would be such as an aircraft in a dive. So if you're going 100 knots or more, if you were to yank up abruptly on the yoke and pull up as hard as you could, you'll still stall that aircraft because it will exceed the critical angle of attack once again. And in turning, anytime that we turn, we're adding to the weight of the aircraft because we're increasing the G level. So for example, if I've got an airplane that weighs 1,000 pounds and I'm in a 2G turn, that airplane now weighs 2,000 pounds, which means that we need even more lift to counteract that additional weight, all right? So with that, got one test question, then we're gonna go into stability. So let's go ahead and look at this real quick here. Let me pull this one up. Try to answer in the chat, please. All right, during a spin to the left, which wing is stalled? Is it A, both wings are stalled, B, neither wing is stalled, or C, only the left wing is stalled? Give you guys another couple seconds on that. I did pause the chat. Hopefully it is working this time when I pause it. So we've got a little bit of split in the class, right? During a spin to the left, which wing is our stalled? Okay, so if we were to think about this, kind of a trick question in a way. Most people are, 57% of the class is saying C, and unfortunately that is not the correct answer. It is actually A. Correct answer is A. So we've got about 37% of the class with A. Now, anytime that we're in a spin, then what we have is both of our wings are going to be stalled, but one wing is going to be more stalled than another. So that's the only thing. So you can either think of it as one wing that is less stalled than another or one wing that is more stalled than another, but one is having more of an effect than another. And that's generally the direction that the spin goes in, all right? But keep in mind that both wings are stalled in that circumstance, okay? Good job, everyone. Go ahead and turn this thing back on, and maybe it worked, maybe it didn't work if I muted it. Maybe it just mutes myself. That's maybe what it does. All right, so James was asking a good question, which is basically like a spin to the left. Like, what do you mean by a spin? Yeah, that's a great question. Let me go ahead and show you guys real quick here. So if we have an airplane, right, what ends up happening is when we're talking about a spin is that when we stall an airplane, what will end up happening is we're going to basically pitch up, and we're going to exceed the critical angle of attack, meaning that we're going to lose enough airspeed. We're going to exceed that critical angle of attack, and then usually what will end up happening is one of the wings will drop. Okay, if we don't recover it, it will go into what is called a spin. So a spin is literally as it sounds. What will end up happening is the nose will come down and it will actually just start doing a spin like this. Okay, usually the aircraft will spin 2 to 3 times per second. We actually go through this in flight instructor training. It's a requirement that we go through, and it's usually the problem with this is that one wing is stalled more than another, but both wings are actually stalled at that point. What I can do is I will share with you guys a video next time of a spin. There's a good video out there, or if you want to YouTube it, it is just go on YouTube and type in the word Cessna spin, and what you'll do is you'll see the actual aircraft spinning, and this is considered a stalled state. So the way that we break that is we have to figure out how the heck do we reduce the angle of attack, right? Even though we're pointed straight at the ground, we actually have to push the aircraft even further down to the ground to break that angle of attack to get the airflow to go over those wings. And then, yep, 2 to 3 seconds. So you guys can practice this. Usually you can go out to like an aerobatic school or someone that's got a decathlon or something like that. It's great practice. It used to be required by the FAA that everyone practice this, but then there was too many accidents, so they got rid of it. But all certified flight instructors have to go through this training. So you will kind of go through the maneuver in terms of how do you recover from this, right? So we use 2 different acronyms. We use PAIR or REAP, depending on your manufacturer. The PAIR, which is for Cessnas, just like this one is power to idle, because we don't want to go faster towards the ground, Ailerons neutral, meaning that we want our yoke perfectly, you know, we don't want to go right or left. The rudder is going to go in the opposite direction. So if I'm spinning to the left, I'm going to slam on the right rudder to basically stop that spin. And then it's elevator full forward, which is basically decreasing that angle of attack. And I'm trying to break that stall. Okay. So that is what we mean. It's not that bad. You won't barf. Well, maybe somebody will, somebody won't. But it is, you want to go ahead and look at your aircraft manual. They are all slightly different. It's usually going to be either pair, right? Power to idle, ailerons neutral, elevator full forward, and rudder opposite, or reaped, which is the same thing. It's just in a different order for the pipers out there. Okay. Hopefully that explains that. All right, let's go ahead and keep pushing on here. We've got just a few more, and then we'll open it up for questions. I know it's getting late on the East Coast, so I appreciate you guys hanging in there. All right, let's talk about dynamic stability. So we have what is known as static or dynamic stability, right? And stability is just really the ability of the airplane to return or not return to its original flight condition. So what we talk about is static stability or dynamic stability. So static stability is what is the airplane initially going to do? What is it going to do if we were to pull up and let go of the yoke and not touch it? Is it going to continue climbing? Is it going to descend? Dynamic stability is what is the airplane going to do over a longer period of time if we just didn't touch the controls whatsoever. So when we look at this, the first one here is known as positive dynamic stability. So the reason why it's positive is that the initial tendency of that airplane is to return or not return to its original position. So in this case, what we have here is it actually returns to its position. Neutral dynamic stability means that it's just going to oscillate forever. It kind of keeps going at the same clip. You can see that it's basically going to climb and then it's going to descend. It's going to climb and descend, and it keeps doing so as we go forward. Instability is probably the worst, where these oscillations, you can see it starts off relatively small. Then what ends up happening is we get a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a little bit worse, and it starts getting the oscillations are larger and larger, okay? So when we're talking about stability, we talk about two things as pilots. We talk about maneuverability and controllability. These are the two things that affect or significant areas that we like to talk about. And these are a lot of people confuse these, especially CFIs. So maneuverability is what is the aircraft or the quality of an aircraft that permits it to be easily maneuvered or maneuvered easily and to withstand the stresses that are imposed on it. Controllability is you, the pilot, putting in whatever your inputs are and the aircraft responding, okay? So that's the difference between maneuverability and controllability, okay? So one thing that we want to think about is that, what is an airplane that is inherently stable? Is it one that is more controllable or less controllable, or is it more maneuverable or less maneuverable? Remember that controllability, once again, is the capability of an aircraft to respond to the pilot's controls, especially in regards to flight path and attitude, okay? With that, I've got an FAA test question here, and I'll bring up the poll. Give me 1 second before you guys start answering. We try to mute the chat. All right, so an airplane said to be inherently stable is it A, be difficult to stall, B, require less effort to control, or C, not spin? I'll give everyone a moment on that. Think about some of the buzzwords that we used. Remember, controllability, maneuverability. I try to include FAA test questions that we just covered, so that way they're not too far in left field. So if we did not talk about it, then it's probably not the right test question, okay? All right, so got about 85% of the class with the correct answer. It is requires less effort to control. So remember, a stable airplane will tend to return to its original condition of flight if disturbed by a force such as turbulent air. So that means that an airplane, in this sense, is what we consider a stable airplane, is easy to fly. All right. Good job, everyone. We are almost done. We just have a couple left-hand turning tendencies, about 7 or 8 more slides. So I appreciate you hanging in there. I told you this is not a watered down course for those that thought this was. I apologize, but we're going to keep it honest here. So let's go ahead and talk about left-hand turning tendencies. So remember, in Newton's third law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So what we're going to talk about is the left-hand turning tendency of an airplane is really made up of these elements. So the 4 elements, and actually we're just going to talk about the 3 elements because the 4th one is a CFI one that I removed. The first one is torque reaction, which is the opposite reaction from the engine and the propeller. We've got a corkscrewing effect from the actual slipstream. And then we have something called P factor, which is a fancy way of, or a simplified way of, for the asymmetric loading, okay? So these are the 3 different ones that we want to talk about as private pilots. So the first one is torque reaction. So any time that the airplane is basically, the engine is going to be moving, and it usually, if we're sitting in the cockpit, we'll notice the prop is going to rotate to the right. So the airplane's natural reaction is to go in the opposite and roll to the left. So by doing that, what will end up happening is, in order to kind of counteract that, we get also a yawing condition when we take off, and we have to apply opposite rudder. You'll see a lot of people in the chat. Sorry, I forgot to unmute the chat, everyone. A lot of people in the chat basically stated that, you step on the ball, and that is correct. That is the whole purpose of it. So when we look at it, let's look at a very simplified version of that for engine torque. So we've got a prop that's rotating to the right, if we were to look at it from the cockpit, and that airplane's natural reaction is going to want to roll to the left, okay? So that is the reason why we've got one set of left-hand turning tendencies. So what we want to look at next is, we call this the corkscrew effect, or also the slipstream effect. This is kind of a cool picture from the 40s or 50s here. And you can see that there's kind of this fog layer that's basically circling this aircraft, this Navy aircraft here. And that basically is a great demonstration of the slipstream or corkscrew effect, however you want to call it. So what ends up happening is, when the wind is blown back from the propeller, it's striking the left-hand side of the vertical stabilizer. So remember that the vertical stabilizer in this case is this thing right here. So as the air is basically circling, it's going to then hit the left-hand side of the stabilizer, the vertical stabilizer, which means that the nose of the airplane is going to want to go, if this is hitting the left-hand side, then this guy, the nose of the airplane, is going to want to go to the left, all right? So that means that with the air that's pushing on the left-hand side of the vertical stabilizer, the butt of the airplane is going to want to go to the right, which means the nose is going to want to go to the left, all right? Now, this is more apt to occur at slower speeds, and this is just because the air becomes more compressed. So what you notice, and when we talk about slipstream effect, and I've got another image here for you, the Rod Michaud simplified version, we have our propeller rotation, and what's normally happening is this is basically going around the airplane and around the fuselage, and eventually it hits the left-hand side of that vertical stabilizer. The butt of the airplane wants to go to the right, and then, as mentioned, the nose of the airplane wants to go to the left, which is creating that left-hand turning tendency, if you will, all right? All right, last one here is the P factor, which is asymmetrical loading. We always just call this P factor. So once again, anytime that we have a propeller is just another version of an airfoil, okay? So an airfoil of any type, whether it's a wing or it's a propeller, can stall, just like anything else. So what we like to think about is, at a low angle of attack, the load on the downward moving prop blade is a bit more. And I'm actually just going to go to the next one because I like this one a little bit better in terms of an easier look at P factor. P factor is like a very easy way to kind of explain the bite. And what we mean by bite is how much of that prop is grabbing the bite of air, if you will. How big is that bite? How much air is that prop actually grabbing as it basically pulls us through the air, okay? So as it grabs the bite of downward moving, because remember the blade is moving downward. The blade that moves downward is actually moving at a faster rate than the ascending blade is moving faster than the descending blade. That's an easier way of thinking about it. We'll get it here in another version. All right, so when we look at a propeller and we're looking at the relative wind, this is just a way of looking at it where we've got the different version of the angle of attack. So when the airplane is at a low angle of attack, the rising and falling blades of the prop have almost the same angle of attack. So in other words, each half of the propeller produces an equal amount of lift, and there's really relatively no P factor, which is giving us those left-hand turning tendencies. Now, if we were to look at it in another way, and remember that all these are kind of exaggerated, when the airplane is at a higher angle of attack, the falling blade, the descending blade, has a larger angle of attack compared to the rising blade, right? So that difference is what gives us that P factor, okay? All right. Next, last ones that we want to cover here are the aerodynamic forces within a maneuver. Okay, so we have specific forces anytime that we're in a turn. When we are in level flight, and hopefully when we consider it straight on accelerated level flight, lift is going to equal weight, meaning that we're not climbing or descending. When we start to turn, what you're going to notice is that we have these different components, which is what is considered a vertical component of lift or a horizontal component of lift. Now, no matter what, vertical component of lift is basically just straight up from the aircraft. Horizontal component of lift is right or left of the aircraft horizontally. Now, whether it's horizontal or vertical, you basically add those two together and you get total lift. But once again, that's above and beyond this class. What we're showing you is that our total lift, or the lift that we need, increases the more that we bank, all right? Because basically our load factor increases. So if we were to look at a very basic textable load factor, if we were in straight level unaccelerated flight or just flying around on a normal day, we would be experiencing 1 time or 1 G, if you will, okay? As we start to make a banked turn, you'll notice that we start to increase the G's. So we're at 1.06 G's on a 20-degree turn, 1.31 at 40. The one that you should know is the 60 degrees. At 60 degrees, you're actually pulling 2 times the amount of gravity, which means that you actually that aircraft now weighs 2 times more than it used to, all right? So when we have an increased load factor, meaning that the increase of weight, that's what's going to cause that airplane to stall at a higher airspeed, because now we've got more weight with less lift, right? So that's what we're talking about. What you're going to notice is that in the FAA test, there's going to be basically this stall speed and load factor. So this is another way of looking at it. And what they're going to say is that they'll basically tell you that you have an airplane in a 60-degree bank. What would be the load factor? Well, in this case, I can go to my bank angle of 60 degrees, correspond that to 2 G's, which basically is here. And I can tell you that it is 2 times that of gravity. So if I had a 1,000-pound airplane, I would multiply that by 2, and guess what? My airplane now weighs 2,000 pounds. All right. It won't cause a lift or weight imbalance, Swathi. Now, the last thing that we want to talk about here is the rate of turn or radius of turn. I'll show you a cool little spaceship one that I found. So this is really referring to what is the amount of time that it's required to complete a turn, right? So it varies depending on our actual airspeed. So if we had a constant airspeed, which is this one up here in number 1, if I maintained a constant airspeed, but I changed my bank, this bank that's giving us a tighter turn is a 30-degree bank. This one, which is not giving us quite a tight a turn, is 20. And then this one, which is giving us a pretty wide, is 10 degrees. This is the equivalent of if you were to turn your steering wheel. How much do you turn your steering wheel? Do you turn it 1 inch? Do you turn it 3 inches? This one at the bottom in number 2 here is taking into consideration the same angle of bank, but we basically have different airspeeds. So what we can see here is the faster that we go with the same angle of bank, this was at 60 knots, the wider our turn is. Now, if we were to go slower and we were to slow it down all the way to 40 knots, we can actually make a much sharper turn without having to turn the airplane, Okay, so almost done, everybody. If we were to look at the radius of turn with our starship here, right? In a low speed turn, our radius is smaller. And if we were going faster, then our radius would be increased, okay? So an easy way of looking at that is an increase in airspeed is going to result in an increase in the radius of the turn, and an increase in the angle of bank results in a decrease in the radius of the turn. So the sharper that I roll into or bank into that turn, then the smaller that this little arc or radius is going to be. Okay. All right. Let me give you one final FAA test question, then I'll let everyone go here. So give me just 1 second. I'll pull it up and I'll mute the chat. Let me mute the chat first, and then we're almost done. All right. So this one, you're going to have to correspond to, this is from the FAA chart. So refer to figure 2, and I went ahead and put figure 2 on the plate here for you. If an airplane weighs 4,500 pounds, what approximate weight would the airplane structure be required to support during a 45-degree bank turn while maintaining altitude? Is it A, 4,500 pounds, B, 6,750, or C, 7,200 pounds? I'll give everyone a moment on that. Right, give everyone another 30 seconds or so. So there's two ways to look at this question. You can either use the load factor chart of the actual chart on the right-hand side, or you can use the table on the left-hand side. And we've got 92% with B, which is the correct answer here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that. So what you could do, like I said, is if you wanted to look at the 45 degrees of bank, you could basically follow that up and see roughly where that is. And you could guesstimate that's roughly 1.5. But the other way of doing it is you look at the angle of bank of 45 degrees, and all we're going to do is this is the load factor number. So if I've got an airplane that weighs 4,500 pounds, I would multiply it by the load factor. So in this case, if I wanted to do simple math, I could do 1.5, but the exact number here is 1.414. And if I break out a calculator here, that's giving me 63 pounds, and the closest answer to 63 is that. If you wanted to get a less accurate way, and kind of the way the FAA is doing it, is if you were to look at this chart here, you can come up with roughly 1.5. And if you were to multiply 4,500 pounds times 1.5, then that gives you 6,750. All right. So with that, let me go ahead and reset that real quick. I hope that you guys enjoyed the class. I appreciate you guys hanging out so far for the 3 hours that we've been here. The classes are normally going to go for a little bit longer. This one is actually a little bit shorter. So let me know if you have any questions. If the website, like I said, is a little bit slow right now, but it's starting to come back. It's just everybody's piling in at once. And I did call the web guy or whoever it is, and he's tweaking everything. So you guys should all have access. As mentioned, there's still 51 spots in the first 100 students for the free hour. So that's still up there. I'll go ahead and put that in the sticky message because I know there's the welcome start here as well. And I'll put that up for you guys. And let me remove that other sticky message. But if you guys have any questions in the meantime, you can always shoot me an email. There is a quiz available. Let me get rid of the slideshow. And that. All right, so there is a quiz available for the aerodynamics section. Like I said, I think it's like 42 questions or so. If you are having a little bit of problems getting on right this second, just give it an hour or so, or you can try it any other time tomorrow. It's just when we've got 5,000 people trying to get in at once, that's usually where the problems are. So with that, like I said, if you have any questions, I am here for the next 30 minutes or so, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. I appreciate Zaf and Missy out there handling all of your questions and appreciate your time. So hopefully we'll make this a worthwhile endeavor for everybody, all right? Other than that, class is over unless you guys just want to hang out. All right, what questions do you have, or are you still confused? And the next class, everybody, remember the next class is going to be on Wednesday at 5 p.m. You should know the drill by now. Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, the class material will open up 2 hours before class. And on Wednesday, we are going to be covering aircraft systems. So that's going to be the engine system. If you want to read chapter 3, and then we're also going to be talking about flight instruments. So that's the 6-pack of the instruments: airspeed indicator, attitude indicator, altimeter, VSI, vertical speed indicator, your heading indicator or directional gyro, and also the last instrument is your turn coordinator, and then the compass. So we'll be talking about all 7 of those instruments there. So that is, if you're on the Rod Machado one, it is going to be chapter 3 and chapter 5, if you want to go ahead and look those over. Otherwise, I will post the pilot's PHAC information for those chapters as well. All right. And oops, let me go and unmute that real quick. All right, so all right, everybody. Any questions that you guys have at this point? Sorry for muting the chats for so long. Appreciate it, Russell. I can, for medical questions, when it comes to your FAA medical, you can search them online. There's really nothing specific that disqualifies you. There's certain medications. They don't really look at obesity anymore. Blood pressure, diabetes, they are allowing pilots with diabetes to fly. But once again, it's easier to make an appointment with the aviation medical examiner, and they can answer all those questions for you. There's really no like cut and dry, black and white, you're disqualified at this point. You don't need to do the quiz tonight. Just do the quiz at some point between now and Wednesday. The quiz is located on the online portal, Jay, which is checkride-prep.com. It's probably going to take a minute or two to load, but once it's there, I'm able to get in right now. As mentioned, the special offer is at the very, very top. You have the option of 3 payments or 1 payment. It's not required, but it will give you lifetime access. And then I think we have 49 spots left for the 1 hour of ground with myself. So you can use that at any point. That does not expire. So as mentioned, that if you guys are struggling with any of these topics, I will sit here with you on a video chat, and it is free. And we'll go over whatever questions you have. All right. Billy is asking, is there an age limit to become a pilot? That's a great question. You need to be at least 15 years old to get your student pilot's license, 16 to take the written test, and 17 to actually get your actual pilot's license. Thank you, everybody. I do not know what that one is. All right. Yep. This is how basically all of the lectures are going to go from here on out. So they are all prepared, and excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. I've taught this class probably about 20 times for live classes or with students in my class. So, it's pretty much the same thing here. Jay can answer those questions. I guess he's a doctor. You're very welcome, Matt. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, and Jay Cohen is a medical examiner. So yeah, if you can answer any of those questions, that would be fantastic. You do not need to get, James is asking, do we need to get a radio telephone license or a radio telephone operator's license? That's not required. Unless you're doing international flights or international travel, it's required once you get up to the ATP side. So I know I've got mine because we go into Canada and Mexico when we're flying. A couple people are asking about the quiz. The quiz is located on the website, checkride-prep.com. And that is what you're going to do is go into lesson 1 at the very, very bottom of that lesson. That is where the quiz is located. You can complete it at any point in time, right? Let's see here. Yep. If you have the textbook, go ahead and you don't have to read it word for word, but chapter 3 and chapter 5 are the recommendations. I will put that up tonight. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate it. Mike, if you're 63, it's still not going to be an issue unless you want to fly professionally. Professional 121 world, you're going to time out at 65, at least for the moment. Your pilot's license, someone's asking, Aaron's asking, how long does your pilot's license last? That's a great question. It lasts indefinitely, but what there are some requirements where we have currency requirements. So while your pilot's license never expires, you do have to meet with an instructor like myself or someone else and have what is called a flight review every 2 years or 24 calendar months. And then to carry passengers, you need to stay current, meaning that we're going to get into this for the regulations, but you need to have 3 takeoff and landings within the preceding 90 days, whether that's daytime or nighttime, depending on what type of flights you're doing, okay? If you're looking for the book, Marcus, just go ahead and Google Rod Machado's Private Pilot Handbook. It's also located on our website. So remember, in the welcome start here, if anybody's missing anything, you can go to that. And that basically has the ISBN number and everything that you need, all right? Average age to be a pilot, the minimum age is 23 years old to be a airline pilot, because that's the minimum for an ATP license. But once again, I think the average age when it comes to like regional airlines, most people are in their mid to upper 20s on most of them. Thanks, Miha. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, you can email me, david@checkride-prep.com. For those that purchased the special, you'll get your 1 hour. There's a coupon code, and then it allows you to self-book. And I'll send those out before the next class on Wednesday. It'll go via email. If you don't see it by class time on Wednesday, just shoot me an email. It may have also gone to your junk mail. So we'll take care of that as well. All right. Robert or anybody else that's having some difficulty getting through to the website, like I said, there's a lot of people that are just, for whatever reason, trying to get on at this given moment. If it is a problem, just try it again a little bit later. Or if it says that your email is being already used, that's because I've already pre-registered you for the course. If that is the case, then you should have already gotten an automated email. And if you're with that password, but if you've lost that or maybe deleted that, then what you can do is you can go to the upper, right-hand corner of the website, click on login, and then it's going to say forget password. Click on the forget password. And by doing that, it will generate a new password for you. All right. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it, Victor. Yep. So for those that may have had an audio issue or anything like that, as soon as we're done here with the Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and download it, and then I'll re-upload it. Give me about an hour or so, and then it'll be on the online portion so you guys can review it. All right. Thanks, Michael. Yep. Second edition of Rod's test book, or any edition, will work out just fine, especially if you guys want to pick up a used copy as well. All right. Let's see here. Ooh, it's cool. And it looks like someone created on Discord like a study group as well. And also keep in mind, on that Facebook group on our page, I do post a lot of videos as well. So if you have not signed up for the Facebook group, I recommend you guys do, just for the fact of that's where, you know, in the event that you lose an email or something like that, usually a lot of people can answer those questions for you. And I do try to post all these PDFs on there as well. All right. Robert's asking, does the Rod Machado workbook help at all? It does help. It's going to give you the test questions. But like I said, it'll be the same thing that we're going to give you every single class. So it's not necessary at this point. All right. Victor, if you need access to the website, or if anybody needs access to the website, go ahead and just go to the website and click on register on the upper right-hand corner. Mark, you have a great night. Thanks for answering that, Bruce. Appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Got to hit the sack. Yep, I got to hit dinner. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this training. I know it's like a fire hydrant, but like I said, we'll all get through it together. Well, I'm going to butcher your name, Wavell Williams. I will find out for you. I think we're doing something like that in the future. Yeah, because it's still a couple months away. We'll know by the end of this class. Dan, send me an email. If your email and password is not working and it doesn't reset, just send me an email and I'll take care of it for you once we get off, all right? Bala, if that's the case, just send me an email and I will take care of it for you, all right? William, yeah, I might need your help. William Rivera, Rivera, I can't even talk right now. Someone said that the SQL needs to be optimized. I don't know if you know anything about that or if you know someone that could help with that. That's what's slowing down everything. I don't even know what that means. All I know is SQL is like where all the data is put together, but that's what the server guy told me. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. No problem, Jeffrey. Original jet books, they will work, but they're probably going to be missing or a little bit outdated when it comes to the GPS section. But like I said, everything else is the same: time, fuel, distance. There are a couple of regulations that changed out there. Scott, he's just got an older version of his textbook. It's the foundational knowledge is the same, but there's going to be some slight variations in regulations such as ADS-B. Obviously, the GPS section, the NDBs are not tested on anymore, even though we're going to talk about them briefly. So all of that stuff, it still does apply. All right. Thank you guys and gals out there. You do the quiz by going to the website and go to lesson 1, very bottom. So that's always a great question. Jessica is asking, are the PowerPoints available? Unfortunately, I cannot make the PowerPoints available. My agreement with Rod Machado when I signed the licensing agreement is that I can present the information, but it is not for printed distribution. So you can watch the video as many times as you want. I just can't release the slides because that was the agreement. All right. The Nathan is asking the rewatch or the replays. The replays, I will send out an email to everyone once it is up and running. And if the website is slightly slow again, I'll probably post it on Facebook or YouTube with the link just so that you guys have a different avenue to watch it as well. Okay. And Brandon, yep, it is WordPress on the background. If anybody can email me on that, David at checkride-prep.com, because it's that SQL thing that's slowing everything down. We are based out of Camarillo, California, which is just north of Los Angeles. Oh, Missy knows the SQL. You're very welcome. Very welcome. Yep, you're at 43 1-hour ground sessions remaining. Someone asked that. Yep, and Bruce, it is David at checkride-prep.com. David at checkride-prep.com. If this is a great question, Jonathan's saying, you know, like life comes up, he's traveling during these courses, you can watch any combination of the live class and the recorded class to equal the 12 classes. Does not matter. The whole reason why we have to get you enrolled in that server that's slow right now is because of the fact is it keeps track of all your tests. It tells me every time that you've watched a video or shown up to a class, and it basically gets all that data together. It's a lot of data. But it also provides a lot of good supplemental information where I'm trying to give you guys more information than what you need just to kind of fill in the gaps. And a lot of times you'll notice like the slides that we covered tonight, I'm trying to give you different views of the same information because everybody learns slightly differently. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Our Adarsh, please send me an email, david@checkride-prep.com, and I'll get you taken care of, okay? Scott Lane, go ahead and send me an email, david@checkride-prep.com, and I will get it taken care of. Let me throw up my email address for you guys, and give me until roughly tomorrow morning to do it. David@check. Can't even spell, guys. All right, there is my email address at the very top of the screen on the chat. So if you guys have any problems, shoot me an email. Like I said, if you're having trouble accessing it, like Scott or Darsh, go ahead and shoot me an email, and don't worry about it. I'll get it taken care of. There's still 43 spots, so not a big deal. It has to hit a certain mark. I think it's set for like the 2-hour mark. Thanks, Elizabeth. Hope everyone enjoyed the class. Is anybody currently flying or taking flight lessons or going anywhere fun? Let's see here. How many hours in cross country to be able to fly a Cirrus? So Frank Small is asking how many hours in cross country training to be able to fly a Cirrus SR-22. You know, once again, it's the same requirement. It's just going to be the faster your airplane. And SR-22 is you know, an airplane that's really cool and really, really fast. And the thing with that is that the faster you come up on the airports, I had this problem because I started my training in an SR-20, I think, at the time. And things come up very quick. So instead of having 10 minutes to think about something, you have 5 minutes to think about it. Let's see here. You had your first hour. That's awesome. Yeah, if you guys want to experience flight, go out to your local flight school. And what I usually like to say, it's really not about the flight school you go to. It's the relationship between you and your flight instructor. That's going to be key because you are living in a very small space with that individual. And you want to make sure that you guys are on the same page and make sure that you are comfortable with them. So what I would usually recommend is going out to a few different flight schools or talking to different flight instructors and seeing what kind of fits the bill in terms of personality style, because that's going to be more important than the actual flight school you go to. All right. Thanks, Carl. I appreciate that. Yep. So someone's asking, what is the name of the chapters for 3 and 5? So the name of the chapters is engines. So it's aircraft engines, and chapter 5 is going to be flight instruments. You can correspond that to the PHAC. The Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. So those will all be there. Raking in those hours to get the commercial. Awesome, Eric. Thanks for being here. Pharaoh, yep, if you work during this entire time, once the live session is done, we'll go ahead and get it up for everyone. James, you're flying tomorrow. Lucky duck. Flying as a safety pilot. Awesome. Flying in the simulators, that's always fun. I think the most fun I ever had in a sim was doing my ATP license, where your ATP CTP course is the only time you get to go into a full motion sim and not have to fear for your job or your life. Every other time, it's always about a check ride, or do you want to keep your job for another 12 months or something like that? Because once you get into the 121 world, you have a 6-month check, which is basically a non-jeopardy event, meaning that you go into the sim and it's kind of more fun. And, you know, even if you don't get something right the first time, it's trained to proficiency. And then you have a 12-month, which is actually just another check ride where there's always 2 legs and you get to fly with a captain. One leg is pretty minor, and then the other leg is something major happens. So whether it's a cabin depressurization, engine fire, engine failure, separation, anything along those lines, or even a cabin fire. Bruce, they don't actually have email addresses. If you want to reach out to them, you can IM them individually. So they are volunteering, thankfully. All right, James, 10 hours doing landings. Yeah, one way to get your landings squared away. I remember I had a student who just couldn't get the landings. So what we did was we went up and we did, I think it was 4.3 in a Cessna. I think we did something like, which is my record. I think it's like 60 odd landings. Couldn't land to save his life when we took off, but could absolutely land and actually got solo the same day once we were done with that lesson. Paige, it's a crapshoot. I know a lot of people that don't like it, and I know a couple people who like it. So I would just recommend talking to students who've gone there. If you want me to put you in touch with a couple, I know some of the positive and negatives, and you can hear both sides of the story. Page, if you want to email me. Awesome, Corey. So you're going to head to Sporties for the G1000 lesson in the 172. If you're going to be studying the G1000, go ahead and get the book. I don't remember the name of it. Just Amazon it. Just go to Amazon and type in G1000. There's a guy that puts together this really cool book on how the G1000 works. It's important that you understand the avionics that you're flying with because you're going to be tested on it. All right. Nathaniel Green is asking, do I need flight time to take the written and or verbal test? No, you do not to take the written. In order to take the verbal and the practical test, you have to be fully qualified, which means that you have to have your written done, your hours done, and then the CFI has to sign you off. You do not need to sign up for other classes, Robert. Once you're on the mailing list, you'll then get additional emails. You guys will get basically 2 emails, one email prior to class and then one email at the end of class, basically letting you know that the recorded version is up and running. All right. John's asking, how valuable do you consider flight simulation and which one do you recommend? I like it more for the instrument side of things for instrument students because that's when you're learning. But at the same time, it all plays a specific, purpose. If I were to recommend one, it would be like X-Plane is probably the best one on the market. I know Microsoft was supposed to come out with a new one this year, but I think the last thing I heard is it got pushed back a little bit. And then in terms of recommended simulators, Redbirds are kind of the elite of the elite, and they've got desktop version ones, but it just depends on your budget because they do get a little bit expensive at times. FAA, so the FAA is still, I don't know if they're actually doing check rides anymore. I know that the DPEs are doing check rides. You just have to figure it out. Some people are, and some people aren't. Have a good shift, Ahmed. Steve, do this. Do me a favor. Just, it should not be occurring. So can you just maybe take it an hour, maybe try tomorrow, and I'll see if I can get this thing improved. Jack has been trying to get current. He stopped flying in the mid 90s. Usually what they say is that for every year that you've been not flying is an hour in the airplane that you need, okay? All right, so re-explain. Let's see here. Also, we can slow down for the next lesson or stay. Yeah, I will slow down for the next lesson and try to go a little bit slower for those that are taking notes. Apologize. It's that energy drink that I have, and then I'll see if I can re-explain that for you. Thanks, Paige. Appreciate it. Oh, that's a pain. You need a COVID test to go to the Bahamas now. The way that I was taught landings, Steve, was obviously there's 3 different points. You have an aiming point, a touchdown point, then you kind of shift your eyes downfield. The way that I like to do it with students is I teach them to basically stay in ground effect for as long as possible. So we've got a 6,000 foot runway here. And what I'll do is I'll have them stay in ground effect and just tell them that imagine that there's a series of cones or beer cans or bottles or whatever. And I want you to knock over as many as you can without touching the ground. So the goal is to get the student to be about 6 inches off the ground and keep in the power and stay in ground effect for as long as possible, because that exaggerates the sight picture, so that way you can see exactly what you're looking at. Because usually what ends up happening is when you're just doing a normal touch and go working on landings, your instructor will be like, that's it, don't you see it? And it's there and it's gone in a second. So by doing that little trick, it kind of floating down halfway down the runway and staying in ground effect, it shows you what that sight picture is for 5 or 10 seconds. John, you can shoot me an email if you want. All right, let's see here. All right, so one question that Missy has from Catherine is basically re-explaining induced drag. So induced drag is the opposite, or let me go back to the slide real quick here. All right, so we have parasitic drag, which is pretty easy to understand because those are the nuts and bolts and anything that sticks out from the aircraft surface that basically doesn't allow smooth airflow over the wing. And then induced drag is slightly different. So induced drag is a byproduct of lift, if you want to think about it that way. And what we mean by that is drag that is induced by the wing as it develops lift. Okay, so as it develops lift, that drag or induced drag decreases as we develop lift and we go faster and faster, all right? So what ends up happening, and I'll give you the exact book definition if this helps. So this is directly from the FAA. Induced drag is the byproduct of lift. In other words, drag is induced as the wing develops lift. So the high pressure air beneath the wing, which is trying to flow around and over the wingtips into the low area of pressure, causes the vortex around the wing. So what we have is, as the angle of attack is increased, lift will increase, and so will the vortices. So remember that when we're looking at induced drag, when we're looking at that drag curve, the biggest thing that you need to know is that induced drag is basically at its highest when we're not moving, and then the faster we go, it starts to decrease. The parasitic drag is moving in the opposite direction, which is actually increasing. I think I can send you a video that's going to explain it a little bit better. When it's animated, it's a little bit easier to see. With an FAA license, you can fly in any country you want as long as it's in at least a US registered aircraft. Right, no more airplane poetry for tonight. All right, I will hang out for another 12 minutes or so. If you guys have any last minute questions or anything like that. I think someone asked, how many do we have left? There's 38 left. 38 1-hour sessions left. Yeah, Paige, like I said, you're going to email me anyway, so I'm happy to send you. There's a good YouTube video out there that I like. It's easier to explain with an animation at the same time than trying to just draw it. All right. Have a good night. Yeah, you'll be able to, John, when we repost the class, you'll be able to go over it and you'll be able to fast forward, especially through the breaks. Nobody wants to sit there for 10 minutes through the breaks. So Zarak, you can go to the other website. I'll pull it up here real quick and put it up for you. Night, Scott. Have a good one. See you on Wednesday. All right, that's the link if you want it. Zaraf. Right, so like usual, 577 people hanging out. Thank you guys. You guys have a great night. You guys have any more questions out there? Comments, concerns? How's the course going? It's a lot of information, I know. Chapter 3 in the book, what page number is it? I mean, it's chapter 3. I've got the second edition in front of me, so it's the thing is he doesn't use page numbers. He uses these these other things, which are, it's Charlie 1. It's section C1. It's kind of like a terminal. Yes, you'll be able to download all the files that I share. And they'll be located right next to the recorded videos. Let's see, is it cost effective to save money to buy a small plane? It can be. A lot of times, aircraft, unlike vehicles, like car vehicles, hold their value a lot better. So there are people out there that are able to put hundreds of hours and get their commercial and then go out and sell that same airplane for basically the same price that they paid for it. But you just have to do your research when it comes to that type of stuff. Jacob is asking, can I take the FAA test without any flight training? Yes, you can. I would recommend just getting the written test out of the way. Some people wait until the last minute, like the week before their check ride. John, my email is david@checkride-prep.com. Yeah, Mike, I understand the confusion of the polls. The thing is it's such an easy thing. I mean, are you guys having trouble finding the polls, or why do we answer in the chat? Just out of curiosity. Does anyone know? Is anyone having trouble finding the polls? Do I need to make like a self-help video for that? Night one. Yep. Anybody can join the course after today, even if they haven't signed up. So it's an ongoing thing. It's just, you know, every lesson that you kind of fall behind is a little bit more that you need to work on. But as mentioned, if you get like the lifetime access, then you can always play catch up as much as you want. Yeah, so no. John says, yes, he's having trouble finding the polls. Too fast, can't write it down. Yeah, I guess, Eric, what I can do is I can put something in like the Facebook group, just like literally a 30-second video of, you know, because it's right below. I'll put a specific slide up the first time. So that way I'll do a screenshot of it. So that way everybody knows they need to actually click on something. Yeah, what ends up happening is I think there's a very small red dot on there that will basically show up showing that the poll is available. But when I muted the chat, I don't know, does that mute that for everybody or? Ah, thanks, Missy. Ooh, there we go. Okay. All right, I'm going to steal that, Missy, and put that up because that's good. Yep, you're with us, Richard. The Checkride checklist available download on the website. So like, what do you mean by a Checkride checklist? You're very welcome, Orlando. Interesting, Jeffrey. So it just mutes it for me? Okay. So it makes me look like you guys are following along. Yep, Jacob is asking, do I need the instructor endorsement for the FAA test? Yep, you do. That's as long as you guys take the 12 classes and get an 80% or higher, then I will endorse you. You'll get that certificate at the end. It's just, I'll send it to you via email, print it out, take it to the testing center. Yeah, we've discussed this and debated this, Victor. He's saying, you know, disable the chat to stop side conversations. The problem is the chat is very, very helpful to the instructor to know if people are lost, or let's say, you know, you lose my audio. If I keep talking for 20 minutes and I lose everybody, it's very difficult. Hey, John, if you have a problem, send me an email. I'll get it taken care of for you. I apologize. Got it. Got it. Yep, I see you, Larry. You're here. Yeah, I think, like I said, once people kind of understand the system, I know like initially, always on the first day of the classes, people start to freak out because they can't get on the website, or they don't know what's happening, or all this stuff, and it's not the end of the world. That's the reason why we tried to pre-plan this a little bit ahead of time and give everyone logins ahead of time. When we first did this free class, we told everyone on the day of to log in, and that was a disaster. So try to get this a little bit more. You got it. You have credit, Larry. It's like I said, it's done. To look up everybody to see who's here or not would take forever, but it's noted in the system. If you're here, then you're here. Yep, that's a great point. The ACS does show the list of Checkride requirements. I mean, it's not an actual checklist, but I mean, that's what will be on your Checkride, okay? You're very welcome, Steve. I appreciate you being here. So the flight Checkride checklist that I had up earlier, that was for a solo pilot. So those were all the requirements that you had to meet in order to become a solo or to solo. So we use that as instructors. If you want me to send that to you, you can send me an email, KL, and I'll be happy to do that. Or I can put them on Facebook. That works as well. The certificate, so your pilot certificate does not expire, but you need to remain current in order to use it. All right. I don't know. I'd have to look at that, Randy. If you're looking to join the Facebook group, just go onto Facebook and literally type in Checkride Prep, and our page will come up, and then down by the groups, it'll be there. So I think, let me see here. And Solomon, I see you. I'll get to that here in a second. For those that are waiting to get into Checkride Prep here, I'll approve everyone that was waiting. Let's see here. You're very welcome, Alex. Yep, the certificate does not expire at the end of the day. You can take it to get your written test done at any point. Once you take the actual FAA written exam, though, it's only valid for 24 calendar months, all right? You're very welcome, Juan. How old is too old? You're not old enough, Richard. If you're 63 and rusty, I actually have a couple of my students, Jeff and Frank out there. They were in your age bracket where they came back into this after 20 years and they just got their flight instructor certificates. So they're teaching now. So I think it took them a year or so to get, and they had to finish a commercial and then obviously they're instructor. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Have a great night, Janice. I can see you, Joe. You're here. Average cost to get a license here in the U.S. Is somewhere between around it could be as cheap as $8,000 and upwards of $15,000. If you start going with the fancier aircraft, then you're going to start getting into even higher dollar numbers. Once again, it's all dependent on how quickly you get it, but that's kind of the average ballpark. Yep, Joe, that will log you, so you're good there. Tom is asking, is ground school different for a helicopter pilot license? Yeah, you can use this towards the helicopter. You're just gonna have to email me at the end of course to remind me that's what you want. And then I just need to send you a couple different pieces of information because there are a couple aerodynamic topics that are different and a couple regulations that I want you to look at, all right? Yeah, 80s, 90s, as long as they're competent, Missy, right? Ricky, at the very end of the course, if you're going to stick with us for the end of the course, you can, there's a document on the very last day on August 14th that you can submit, and then we give you the credit. Dual instruction can be logged from right or left seat, does not matter. When I am teaching CFIs or CFI candidates, I, as the instructor, sit in the left seat and they sit in the right seat. Yep, Elliot, you can absolutely make it up, and the recording will be available once we're done with this live session here. All right. You're welcome, Tom. I appreciate it. Perfect. John D. Hunter. I'm not sure, Andrea. The only emails here are going to be from David or info@checkride-prep.com. Maybe someone was emailing you, or within our system, you're actually allowed to connect with other people or instant message. Cheapest way to get your private pilot license is to, let's see. The private is probably one of the more expensive ones. There's cheaper ways once you get done with your private. Like once you're an instrument pilot, then you can start splitting time with other pilots, and then you reduce the cost in half. But Like I said, try to, if money is an issue, and it always is in aviation, this is an expensive hobby or expensive career that we all have to pay for. Try to block it into certain things. So if you can save enough money and work on all your solo stuff and then save enough money to do your cross country, that's kind of the best way. If you want to kind of do it all at once like that. Yes, Robert, right. You are here, sir. Andrea, yep, that's perfectly fine. You're welcome, Thomas. You guys have a great night. I will see you Wednesday, Marcus. Have a great one. Anybody else have any more questions? Thanks, Lashana. Appreciate it. If anybody had any issues with explanations or anything, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to answer the questions again. Yep, I'm glad I was able to turn you off of the mega skeptic, Jeffrey. You just have to listen to my PSA for 5 minutes at the beginning of class, so I appreciate it. All right, so Pharaoh, if you're going to do your oral, like I said, the oral prep class that we offer basically follows the PAVE checklist, and it's a way that I've been able to get almost 100 students through. And instead of being a 3 to 5 hour oral, I've been able to actually get my students all the way through an oral, a private pilot oral, in like an hour, hour and a half. Okay, thanks, Randy, appreciate it. Licenses average, depending on flight costs, like I said, 8 to 15,000. Stanley Cohen, I can see you, sir. Yep, David Talbot, if you missed the class, it's not rebroadcast. It's just the recording is re-uploaded to the website, and then you guys can watch it. Yes, shoot me an email, please, and Natalie, and I'll give you some additional information. If you're looking to fly a tailwheel, you first need your private pilot's license, and then tailwheel is actually a add-on, or not an add-on, but the endorsement. So it's something that you have to get additional training for. The videos will be available on the website, checkride-prep.com, once we're done. Mahalo, Jason. You have a good one. I see you, Mr. Bola. What are you guys all doing out there? 426 people hanging out, huh? It's like the good old days. We might be doing the IFR course. We did the free IFR course last time, but we'll see here. So awesome, Tyler. Glad we were able to help. Yep, take a lot of notes. Learn from everybody in this group. What do we all want to fly? It's a good question. I have to see where that is. Joliet, California. Probably like a 3-hour flight. Jolon is kind of in the Bay Area-ish area. We're all the way down by Los Angeles. Sorry, Larry. Like I said, if it's taking too long, don't waste your time. Just go back a little bit later if you can. A Mooney, yep. Moonies are awesome, but you got to like slide in there like a sardine and grease yourself up. And then once you're in there, there's plenty of room, but they're pretty like long and slender. Yeah, if anybody was supposed to go to Oshkosh was officially supposed to happen today. Unfortunately, because of COVID and everything else, it's all down. But yep, we actually have tickets for next year in 2021. Pharaoh, if you just get the ultimate package, or I'm sorry, if you just get the private pilot one, it's included in it. So yeah, and there is that drone course. Thank you, Missy. It is free. I think it's 3 classes, so it's a total of 10 or 11 hours. So when you're in a turn, right, remember one aileron is basically going up and that's creating drag. And by creating that drag, the wing is going to drop, and then the opposite aileron is going to go down. And when the relative wind hits it, it's creating lift. So we've got one wing that's basically creating more drag on one side and more lift on another, and that's what basically gives us the roll. Okay. If you haven't been to Oshkosh, make it part of that bucket list, especially 2021, since everybody's missing it this year. Kit foxes are pretty cool, Robert. I'm not a builder myself, but they are pretty cool. I've seen a few around the field here. Yep, Akri, you can finally chat. Yep, so I think I've answered that a few times. The training cost for a private pilot would be somewhere between $8,000 and $15,000, depending on where you're going. Don, that's awesome. Your grandpa was inducted into EAA Hall of Fame. It's pretty cool. 2 hours away, no excuses. It's a quick little drive or a very, very short flight, especially coming from California. For us, that's you know, that is quite the trek for us. It's usually like 10 hours, but for my students, I've had a lot of students I had one student that wanted to go to every Class Bravo airport. So we took a little Cessna all around the country, and we actually did a couple laps. Went up to Chicago O'Hara, Atlanta, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Francisco, LAX, Vegas, San Francisco. You're very welcome, Don. Have a great night. All right, folks, any last minute questions, comments, concerns? For those of you that sent me an email, I will go ahead and take a look at it once we get off. And my first priority is just going to be to get this video up for everyone, and then we'll take it from there. All right. All right. With that, I'm going to call it a night. Tyler, if you're looking for, that's a great question. Before I do it, Tyler's asking, is there a place for financial support besides the parents? I will put up a link that has a listing of all of the different grants and all that stuff, like AOPA, and there's a bunch of them. There's a good one that does that basically puts it all together. Okay. Nope, you don't need to see everything. Nope, this is all bonus, Stanley. All right, everyone. So we're wrapping it up here. I hope everyone has a great night. If you have any questions, send me an email. If you had any problems, send me an email. Give the server, you know, time to rest here, because still there's a lot of people trying to log in. But I appreciate everyone's time. Appreciate the 300 people that are still sticking around here. And other than that, you guys have a great night, and we will see you on Wednesday at 5 p.m. All right. Take care, everyone.